Good morning, everyone, or good evening to those stateside. Where is everyone? I know I'm late. I do apologise. I'm 10 minutes late. Anybody going to drop in? Oh, we got 3. Just say hello or leave a question. Anyway, it's been a busy week for me. Another person resigned. Had another person that's changed and a new person that's come in. Life's dandy at work currently. Okay, Deborah, good morning. Ben, how are you? G'day, Loki. Yeah, so people are resigning, people are leaving, people are going elsewhere. You know, it's just ridiculous. What's been happening lately at work? So it's been a bit stressful. I was looking forward to 3.5 years into retirement that wouldn't be too all over the place, but doesn't look like it's going to be like that. It's going to be like I'm going to be training and mentoring until the end of my career. So I had a performance management review, got over that. A few additional mentoring and training tasks were added. So I'm fine. I'm fine with that. I mean, I want to get the information across to people. I want to sort of preserve the corporate, archive corporate knowledge, and not for it to get lost, so it's easier for the next person coming in. But it's just, it's just bizarre and weird, and currently, and I'm sort of over the high. This turnover that's been happening recently, it's just freaking crazy. Drives me up the wall. But anyway, let's get on with it. That's my troubles. Everybody else has troubles around me, it seems, these days. It's just, yeah. Anyway, Wolverine. That's the hydrogen stuff, isn't it? Bacteria. You're talking about the archaea, that sort of stuff. Using oregano advice. Berberine actually does much better, and also in order to get some of the shit out, it seems that calcium D-glutarate also can help. That's the one that actually sort of prevents reabsorption of certain types of organisms or certain types of toxic compounds as well. It seems to have a bit of an effect as well on the membrane of these sort of organisms, and so helps a bit. So calcium D-glutarate, but the key one is berberine. So you can get that on any. It's not that expensive to get. Let me just and since we don't have a lot of people here at the moment, and oops. Found it. Give me a sec. And this contains nothing else in it whatsoever. No chemicals, no crap. It only has vegetable cellulose. It has absolutely nothing else in it. So this is one of the better companies, Paradise Herbs. It's the stuff for the B complex vitamins and stuff like that I usually recommend, because no, not really. They eat everything. Any sulfurs from any proteins from any plants, any whatever. They can use fiber to ferment. They're basically not particular in that regard, and they tend to basically increase with remember, in order to basically suppress them, the biggest problem is that you may have also lost, and this is something that I haven't actually made a video of, but to discuss, but there is good literature showing that the jab and the seems to spike and the C19 has this effect on decreasing bifidobacteria. So what happens is when bifidobacteria goes down, pathogenic type Firmicutes, you still need some Firmicutes, but the pathogenic like Prevotella that the vegans talk about, that is great, but it's not. It actually increases certain inflammatory interleukins that they've got it back to front completely, but that's another story. I mean, most scientists don't consider Prevotella overgrowth as a good thing. It's just somehow bizarre. Somebody's convinced some vegans, and they've bought into that sort of nonsense, where none of the literature actually shows that. I've actually done myths and falsehoods on veganism and actually cover that. So there's that issue, and then also we've seen a reduction in lactobacillus. And so what I usually say to people is, what we do need to do is use the Ruteri, let me just find that as well. So it's a combination. So you take this berberine and also the Biogaia. Hold on. I think this is the one. Yep, that's the one. Oh, come on, settle down. This is the strain that is actually required. It's the DSM. So remember, Lactobacillus reuteri is a family. They're all families. And so there's a grouping, they're a big family, and then under that there's sort of like the different, so you've got a big Lactobacillus group, then under that you've got a family, it's the Rhamnosus, the Kefir, the Acidophilus group family, there's the Reuteri family. Now, within the Reuteri family, DSM 17938 is the most potent one. It suppresses C. diff, some of this archaea bacteria that cause some of this problem, that sort of stuff. So this helps as well. The problem is the dosage is too low, 200 million CFUs, not enough. They want you to bite continuously. That's why. It's a business. Let's not forget, if they gave you a very super high doses of billions, you'd get quicker results. So what you do is you make your kefir and you add it to the kefir. So it actually grows in the kefir and it becomes in the billions of amounts, and you consume kefir. And that helps because it's also got certain lactobacillus strains which suppress. So this is a multifaceted. So you got the kefir. If you can tolerate milk, fine. If you can't, do a water kefir, which means you have to put some sugar in and stuff like that to keep it growing. So that's the thing. And just be careful with the sugar. You leave it for a couple of days, like 2-3 days in order to consume most of it, so you're not ingesting sugar yourself. So that's with a water kefir. And with the milk one, yeah, it's every 2 days, 48 hours, and you can consume it. And I haven't thrown that in, have I? Be a good idea if I threw it in and concentrated on. Oops. So that's what I did. I didn't buy heaps. I just bought 1 pack, and then I used kefir to basically grow the damn thing. So to save money, obviously. And NecroKitty did the same thing, and a few others have done the same thing. So that's how to get around that sort of stuff. So yes, and yeah, look, human foods, animal foods, are basically very high in things like lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. That myths and falsehoods video that I made actually covers that. It's only, we do have some of these sulfur type bacteria, but fiber can actually grow them. So can fat, so can protein. They can use anything to ferment to get the, so yeah, it's irrelevant what it is. So you can have garlic, you can have whatever, you can have certain plants that have still got certain compounds that can be utilized, certain amino acids. It doesn't make any difference. They can still do it. The whole purpose is, why are they there? It's because the other stuff has declined and they can grow. So if you've got an environment where, and they also tend to grow in a Candida type environment as well. So, check your tongue if it's very white and all that. Maybe you've got Candida overgrowth. So just keep that. There is some herbs that can help with that as well. And berberine also helps with that as well. So just keep all that in mind. I need to make these gut videos, but anyway. A lot of things to make. I've still got 3 cancer videos to make before I do my final protocol. Never ending. And work isn't helping with all their constant freaking demands, and it drives me up the wall. Ben, Ben, where's your Q in front? See, Wolverine put a Q. Hasn't Bart K, Bald Man Bad, actually trained you people? Bloody hell. I'll have to get Ted over to spank you. Any problems, you may enjoy it. Okay, so what's been said? Can low vitamin D cause difficulty holding onto sodium? Recent labs show vitamin D, sodium without. Look, the regulator. Sorry, don't worry. I'm just pulling a leg. So I can tell a question between an insult and just basically being humorous. There's Sammy as well. G'day, Sammy. NTL and ITX and Nathan. Question, Nathan. Good morning, Harry and all. Well, Nathan, your question. You are being very, very nice and friendly. For that, take a laxative. Oh, hello, Kitty. Good morning. My annoying neighbour. And John Wong. How are you, mate? Johnny Wong. I noticed our dear friend has, is it his new girlfriend or something? When I popped out half naked yesterday. Let me know. You didn't say anything. You took off. Anyway, but I had to. You were making a lot of noise, so I had to call you guys out. Keep it down. I'm trying to have a relaxing bath. Don't answer that question. I've already answered it for you. Yes. So, look, our systems can be quite different. There are some variability, and also how much fluids we consume. So if I'm consuming a lot of fluids, I'm going to lose more sodium. That's a normal thing. Vitamin D is brings in calcium, but obviously if you're not getting enough calcium into the system, it can also affect the homeostasis between calcium and sodium in the bloodstream. And you may dump sodium in order to balance out that, and you may dump other electrolytes in the actual cells, because you must maintain electroneutrality between the intra and extracellular fluids. That means the fluids inside the cell and all the fluids in the bloodstream. And so as a consequence of that, you have a situation where you're trying to balance things out and you can lose certain things. Now, obviously, something like taurine regulates that at the kidney level, and actually will recycle and recover. It'll work a bit harder in order to recover, to maintain that balance, that osmotic balance a bit better. But the consequences is that, it depends on the weather, your physical activity. There's a lot of things like that that can actually have an effect. So if you're very physically active in very warm weather, I tend to lose a lot of sodium. I'm one of those sodium dumpers. So I need a lot of sodium. So I have to, otherwise I get heart arrhythmias or whatever else. So I'm one of those things. And I also have those genetics, 24% of people have, that I can't absorb calcium as well. So I need more calcium. So I have those sort of problems. How did I deal with that? I made sure that my vitamin D is very good, that I get taurine, and also whether from the diet or from supplementation, and also that I'm getting enough sodium and calcium from the diet. So I salt my foods to taste, and I don't salt as much as I used to. And the reason for that is because I consume less water. Less of this stuff. So that's for a dry throat after talking to you guys for hours. But otherwise, that can actually affect the antidiuretic hormones. Too much fluids coming in, the antidiuretic hormones are going to be downregulated. They get upregulated, you actually are holding on to fluids, but also you're holding on to a lot of these sort of things. You're losing less. This is how tribal people don't lose fluids and don't lose in arid environments. They don't drink water. They hydrate with fat, and they minimize their water consumption in order to basically upregulate their antidiuretic hormones. So all these things are in play. So if you consume too much of this or do that or drink too many coffees, like I have a tendency, there's a coffee here. That's an antidiuretic. So it's going to cause, it's going to mean that I'm going to lose a few fluids. Luckily, most of my water is just primarily coffee. Very little, This, I only buy this lower ppm water for one purpose, for my coffees and the potential dry throat. It's deuterium depleted. It's actually slightly lower than even, it's a new type of deuterium. Yeah. So you can actually buy it online, deuterium depleted water at a sort of lower ppm in that regard. Different things, or dilute it with other spring water. So you can buy very low ppm, dilute it to get it around to 120 odd or whatever. And that means you're in the safe zone between 100 and 130. Sorry, 100, and 130. So you can do that. So to have it for your coffee, which is what I do. So I just buy it off Amazon. There's plenty of, there's a company there that it's a Romanian company that sells it. The other company, which is the Hungarian, is slightly a bit more expensive, but you can get that sort of water. But usually, I would say if you've got access to the sun, get out in the sun, because that's your best source of vitamin D. It's a water-soluble vitamin. It's called vitamin D sulfate. And it's pretty much, you can get up to 20,000 IUs. Any excess that isn't used just gets peed out. So it's a pretty good way of actually getting your vitamin D from the sun naturally. But if you're in environments away from the equator, which the majority of us, many of us are nowadays compared to our ancestors, then we're going to have less vitamin D all year round. That's why depressive, many other issues tend to be higher the further away you go. Now, some people require more than others. So some people, like myself, require more vitamin D in order to absorb my calcium. Very critical. So because of the genetics. So it can vary. But also we're not living a naturalistic environment out. We're living in very tight environments in cities and stuff like that, where communicable diseases are much higher, their prevalence, compared to what our ancestors would have had thrusted on them from the environment. It'd be very rare, We now, due to domestication of animals, due to many other things, we've got far more circulating pathogens compared to that we have to deal with. And vitamin D is very important for the immune system. So all these sort of things have an effect. So I would say if your vitamin D is low, correct it. And you need to play around with sodium, consuming and all that, and seeing where your sweet spot is in order to basically not have any symptoms of any sort. So it's really, reading your body more than just reading some result. Intiel, good morning to you as well. You're welcome. And when you drink alcohol, you can eat anything to counter its effects. I've talked about this before, vitamin B complex and choline. So before going out on a bender, you bad young lad, you basically, Ben, yep, you're welcome, mate. And Darkfield Carnivore's here as well. How are you? Andrew Dean, KL, Easy Zillis, and I think I've covered pretty much everyone. Yeah, so it's not something you should do on a constant basis. Even I do have the occasional alcohol on special occasions, somebody retires or whatever that, but it is contraindicated. It's a poison to the body. Let's just be honest about it. G'day, Troy. Invite wedding ID. But how do we mitigate it? The key thing is you go through a lot of B vitamins, cheating supplements. I'm trying to help this young man. I think he's a young man. So stop giving me a hard time. Hello, Kitty. She always gives me a hard time. Don't give them advice of that sort. So they're going to still do it. Trying to mitigate the damage and trying to encourage them a better lifestyle. Anyway, for cheater. Now, 2 B complexes before going out and 2 grams of choline. When you return, have another 2 B complexes with a bit of water, then go to bed. And that should, so the choline will export all the fat out of your liver, so you don't get fat accumulation. That's the purpose. You can even have it any other time. It'll still help with that. But we want to encourage it to get out of the system. Why? Because if we can export fat more effectively out of that, and also helps with bile, and so I'll also take some taurine, like 6 grams of taurine, as long as you're not on blood pressure meds or lithium or anything other stuff like that. Only 2 then. So depending on, if you're on any sort of stuff, so be very careful. And then pretty much that will help with the detox sort of stuff. And on the other hand, exporting out the fat, which will mean that it'll take a bit less stress off the liver in dealing with fat storage. So then the liver can basically deal with detoxification, and you need a lot of the B vitamins and a number of amino acids as well. But, I suspect if you're going out, you're going to be having some animal foods. So as a carnivore, so you'll be getting those, and that'll be less of an issue. You're just going to be dealing with the detoxification. Now, you've got to be very careful, because once you take B vitamins, like 2 B vitamins, it's much harder to get drunk. And people have a tendency to drink more because they can tolerate more. Not a good idea. So yeah. But anyway, your life, I can't tell you how to live your life, just how to mitigate some of the damage. And then the other is to basically take 2 after when you return from your night of enjoyment. I'll leave it there before I get into trouble. And I know she will give me a hard time about giving people ideas like that. Carl. Didn't see Carl. Well, anyway, good to have you here. Hi, how are you? Giving plasma nearly 1 kilo every 2 weeks. I'm lowering my immune system. My age is 68, 2 to 5 years of carnivore. So what's the actual question you're trying to ask? You're giving blood. Do you have hemochromatosis? Is that what you're actually saying? I'm not. Taurine really helps with homeostasis of ions. So sometimes people, they may not be eating enough fish in their diet if they've got hemochromatosis. And so I say, well, if you don't like fish, take a bit of taurine supplementation, minimum 2 grams per day, and that should improve your iron homeostasis and eliminate any potential free iron floating around. So that's the best way of actually dealing with it, if that's what your question is about, because it's not very clear. How are you, Sammy? Wishing you, Harry, and all a great day. Thanks, mate. Have to get going for photography, but wanted to say, yep, thanks. Yep, not a problem. Chat to you later, maybe on a Zoom session in the future. Never see study. Nutrients for optimal strong bones. Protein, and more protein, and more protein, and more protein. Look, 2 nutrients. There are no. What is bone? Mineralized collagen. That's what it is. So what do you need? Protein. What do you need to enhance protein synthesis? 2 things. Leucine. So you want foods that are high in leucine, animal foods that are high in leucine. They will be the key thing. Number 1. Second thing, you want to amplify the effects of leucine, taurine. Taurine binds to mTOR in muscle and bones, muscle skeletal. It does not bind to mTOR in fat cells. I wonder why. So it doesn't enhance mTOR in fat cells, but it does actually bind to just the ones in bones. When mTOR gets activated by proteins, especially leucine, in the bones or the muscles, that's where the taurine goes and binds. And if there's no leucine present, that means you're fasting, it actually does the complete opposite. It actually enhances autophagy, the complete opposite. It's a great master regulator, as I've said, this sulfonic peptide. But, so, the key thing is we want to enhance. Less bone loss and all that. That's why I recommend older people take, if they're not having enough if this is a question for an older person and they're not eating enough like leucine, not getting enough meat and all that, I encourage them to put 6 grams of leucine in an evening bowl of yogurt. That's what my dad does every night. Has leucine, taurine in his yogurt. That's why he was hit by a vehicle, thrown a few meters away, ended up with ligament problems and issues like that, but no fractured or broken bones. And here we got vegan, some vegan, Sean Baker had a video, some vegan actress does a bit of exercise. It ends up, with hip fractures. What a joke. Again, nutrient deficient diet, low in leucine, low in taurine. What do you expect? So that's what we want. And I usually, and also at night is when you absorb calcium the best, in the evening. So as a consequence, what you want to do is you want to enhance the uptake of those nutrients in the evening. So if you're going to use any like a mineral supplement as well, like a trace mineral supplement, I would have it in the evening as I'm having my yogurt and I'm having my taurine and leucine to enhance bone health and bone strength. Anyway, Nathan, always a pleasure. I'll put you up there because if I don't, you'll give me a hard time, won't you? I know you will. You'll come on banging on my door, giving me a hard time. Why didn't you put me on cut in lights? Anyway, hi Harry. I've recently heard that probiotics don't take resident in the gut. True or false? It depends on the brand. If the brand goes through, it actually tends to be much better in food. So, like the lactobacillus are acid loving. And so they will get absorbed in, things like kefir and stuff like that and fermented stuff and certain other types that are acid loving, not a problem. The non-acid loving won't. Well, that's the whole idea because a lot of the non-acid loving are pathogenic in many cases, like salmonella and things like that, but not all of them necessarily are. So if you've got good stomach acidity, that's not going to happen. So what you need to get is probiotics which are enteric or have them on an empty stomach with water, just down on an empty stomach. Never, never, never take probiotics in a fed state. You got acid, so you want to have them on an empty stomach early in the morning before you've eaten anything and your stomach, gut are not very active at that time. And not at night because you may still be digesting or at the ends of that. So if you're going to take, and it has to be, specific stuff because you've actually got deficiencies. Remember, if you don't have deficiencies, you don't really need probiotics. If you get enough taurine, which regulates inflammasome and AMP, what it does is it actually re-regulates the gut microbiome. Over time, things normalize. It's only when we've lost certain things like C19 and the, that inappropriate thing that some people do, that can actually lower bifidobacteria to very low levels. And bifidobacteria is very important because it actually produces a lot of the B vitamins and also interacts with vitamin D. So there's a lot of cross interactions with the gut immunity. So if it's low, you are more susceptible to pathogenic or also inflammatory or derangements of inflammasome that can actually happen. So that can be an issue and all that. So that's So there's a couple of companies out there that produce some good products. There's one on Amazon. I'm trying to think off the top of my head now. Anyway, it's a video that's coming. So at some point that I'll cover all that properly. But yes, if you've got existing stuff you've already bought, take it very early in the morning. Okay, does excess C turn into oxalate? Yes, it can. Remember the problem with vitamin E and this is another reason why vitamin E and vitamin C can become a pro-oxidant, can become a problem, because you've only got like one electron doning that actually happens with vitamin C and vitamin E. That's why we should never consume vitamin E, but consume vitamin E as a vitamin E complex. That means with all the tocotrienols. That means a different length type. Now, on a carnivore diet, you don't need vitamin C or vitamin E if you're in a good state and you're actually producing enough intracellular antioxidants and you're not consuming any sugar. If you're not consuming any sugar, you're at basal level. The receptor sites, that means glucose, any little, like you do a bit of exercise and you get a slight spike above basal level of glucose in the system, in the bloodstream. That is poorly absorbed by the peripheral tissue or the other cells through GLUT1 receptor. GLUT1 receptor does not require insulin, only GLUT4. GLUT4 is the one that we also absorb vitamin C. So if you're not actually forcing up insulin signaling, you're going to leave that available to vitamin C. So if you cheat, because that's what it usually does, I'm carnivore, but I'm having a few little snacks here and there. Well, that's potentially could cause a vitamin C deficiency. So a pure carnivore won't, but something like that will, because you've just engaged insulin signaling above the basal level, your normal signaling to do things like protein synthesis or this or that. Because, the insulin to glucagon is 1.3 in the carnivore state. It's not zero insulin. There's still a bit of insulin signaling that happens even when you're not fed at all, and glucagon signaling even in a fasted state. It's not completely zero. Nothing, so to speak. So in that regard, is if it's above basal level, because there is too much sugar in the bloodstream, it needs to be put away, then the GLUT4 receptor is going to be prioritized to get rid of the sugar, to protect the endothelium. Okay? It has to get out of the system, Otherwise, you create inflammation from excess. Randall cycle. You guys probably have heard me talk about it, Bart and many others. So if there is no of that engagement of the Randall cycle, there's no excess above baseline that's required for general sort of signaling of insulin, the sort of low grade normal stuff in a low fed or in a low carb state, then GLUT4 is just wide open to absorb any amount, even the smallest amount, because we only need very small amounts of vitamin C. It's only when insulin is being signaled slightly higher that it actually then prioritizes to all the cells, peripheral cells. When we talk about peripheral cells, we mean non-brain cells. Then you're actually locking out vitamin C. That's why people on a standard diet have to take vitamin C supplements to force more in. but we only need very minuscules in the nanomole, very, very tiny amounts. This is why populations, carnivorous populations, do not get scurvy. But as long as they stay clean and carnivorous, if they don't, they're constantly cheating, well, that's a different issue. Then yes, they could potentially get over a long period of time low-grade scurvy and all that, because there is some vitamin C in the actual animal foods as well. Very little, but you don't need a lot, as long as you're not affecting the receptor sites that are taking in the stuff. So yes, and it is a problem with oxalate, and we don't want to be producing a lot of oxalate or turning these into pro-oxidants. And if you're actually doing inappropriate things, your intracellular antioxidant system is going to be in the toilet, and you won't have enough glutathione, which comes from eating animal foods. And being in a low carb state, you upregulate glutathione. So selenium, taurine, all these things help with glutathione and a number of other nutrients in animal foods. So glutathione levels in carnivores are much higher. They recycle vitamin C and vitamin E. And by recycling them, by electron doning to them, so glutathione goes, here's an electron, Mr. Vitamin C and Mrs. Vitamin E, and that's a recycling, and they can still do their job. And that's how it works. And that's how it's always worked. It's a great system, as long as you don't interfere with it with carbs, which then deranges it and changes the way it works. And then people take supplements and end up with generating a lot of oxalates for no good reason. Anyway, yes, that's how I felt about it as well. Do you really want me to answer that question? I don't think you want me in public. How's my father? Yeah, he's doing really good. He's fine in that regard. Look, his biggest problem is his knees, probably because he had a knee problem. He had fallen from the second floor and he damaged his knee, and they actually set it wrong, and it's just got progressively worse and worse. And since he had the accident, it seems that the ligaments, the way they've actually, I'm not sure exactly what's happened, but they say his leg seems to lock up a bit more than normal. And so that's a bit of a struggle for him. So in terms of just general how he feels, much better. But in terms of his mobility, it has been affected slightly. He still can get around. He still walks and all that. But before, he would go with his walking stick and come back with like a bag with stuff in his other hand. Now he takes his walker, even if he's just buying very small items for stability. So he's lost a bit of his stability, which is unfortunate, but these things happen when you're in an accident. Even if you don't break bones and all that, you're still going to have ligaments that are going to be torn, that are going to take months to heal, which is a real, bugger, especially at that age. You're talking about nearly 90. In January, he's 89. So, it takes much longer, less energy and all that. I'm thinking about a few other things to do in order to restore better mitochondrial function. So I'm going to experiment on him again. Yes, hello, Kitty. I will put him in a cage and experiment on him. Evil Harry will experiment on Daddy. So, yeah. So pretty much I will be trying a few things out to see whether we can actually improve. So I have to buy him some deuterium depleted water and do a few other things. It's not that... Anyway, let's continue. So, yeah. So we'll see how it all goes in that regard. So I'm sort of confident that I have to convince him to do a few things that he may not want to do. Let's see how that all plays out. So there may be certain extended fasts that he needs to do. He doesn't like doing it. One day he can do it, but he doesn't like doing it extended. There's a few things that I would want him to do, but I don't know if I'm going to manage to convince him or not. We'll see how we get with that. But anyway, all the people resist, which is, yes. I was relaxing. I was having a nice, relaxing bath. You know, or trying to. That's the operative word, trying to. But somebody was really noisy. G'day, mate. Easy Zealous. And KL. And Pavel. How are you, mate? Could there be deleterious effects from high dose of biotin, like 10 milligrams? According to some anecdotes, it helps with oxalate dumping. Yeah, it does. It does. I've never heard of anyone that's had really any problems with biotin, even in high doses. Let me put it this way. Let me just remind myself, because I just cannot remember the... let's just share the screen. Let me find the other one as well. I'll find it first and then... Okay. Okay, so this is the NIH site. They'll say you need 30 micrograms. As an example. And one whole egg is 10. I suspect that's what you're actually asking, because that's quite low if that's what you're asking, or you're actually really asking milligrams. But anyway, egg whole and all that. So there's a whole egg, which is 10 micrograms. Remember this guy? It was doing for multiple decades, had no health problems. This is back in 91. Go away. Who was trying to understand the mechanism of adaptation. How does this person stay alive with so much cholesterol consumption? You bad old man. Anyway, yes, we've heard all that. Yes, outlived his parents. Dad 40, mum at 76, I think, from memory. Anyway, so yeah, dad, unknown causes 40, 76, his mum died. Yep. Okay. So he was a person who loved his eggs. So on average, so sometimes he'd have 30 eggs. And they used to bring them out in cartons this was not in his home. He was actually in a nursing home. So the staff there knew that they were delivering his addiction. He had an addiction to eggs. Yes, people have addiction to all sorts of things. Some women, some other things, but, he had to eggs. Yes, probably less dangerous. Times 25. So we're looking at about a quarter of, so if we divide that, that's about 8 times the recommended dose for men. Had no problems. But, you know, I've never seen any research in terms of, so eating foods very high in biotin, you're never going to get a problem. Most supplement makers out there, in terms of the sort of B complex and all that, don't usually actually provide that sort of level in general. So, but it depends on the brand and all that. I don't think people need to take doses that high. If that's what you're actually saying, I'm not sure whether that's exactly what you're implying. That, but I don't think I've actually seen that sort of level. Because most stuff out there is not going to be at that sort of level. Not that I've come across. So as you can see, it's 300 micrograms. I think they got the percentages wrong anyway. So that's similar to what this person, so if you was having 30 eggs a day, it's equivalent to 30 eggs a day in this supplement. Unless you're actually buying a specialized biotin supplement, and I don't know why you would be bothering at all. Our bodies can tolerate quite a bit of biotin. I don't think, maybe 10 milligrams is way too high. There is, why would you bother taking that amount? The best one to take is pretty much, and even there you don't want to take very high, is P5P, which I've talked about before, which is vitamin B6. But when you're oxalate dumping, that's going to be more effective than biotin anyway. People on a carnivore diet should be getting enough biotin. You have 3 eggs, forget about even meat, 3 eggs, you'll get all your daily requirements and whatever else in that regard. So if you're, let's say, having 3 ounces of pork, you'll get 3.8 as an example. To get 30, you'd have to have about 23.68 ounces, or minus 16. So pretty much 1.5 pounds of pork to get enough. Remember, these sort of RDIs and all that are not what are basically based for people on a general diet. And those people need far more. We don't. On a pure carnivore diet, you need about 1/3 of that for your general functionings and all that. So we get it more than enough from the diet. If you eat a couple of eggs, you'll get way more than enough. Obviously, we live in a modern world, and in a modern world, we are susceptible to all sorts of things. And that's why we sometimes need above these base levels. But you can just have a few extra eggs to get that extra stuff. Remember, you're not going to get much advantage from a supplement because you still have certain enzymatic steps. Your enzymes need to do certain processes in a certain speed, certain frame for a certain period of time. Giving more won't make those enzymes work faster. These are cofactors. They're not going to basically work any faster. And it would depend. And the older you are, it even works even slower because you've got less ATP energy in the system. You're producing less. You've got more mitochondrial damage, less, so more isn't going to be used. Most cases, it's just going to be peed out. It's expensive urine, as I call it. So, but do I have any research showing? I know that I've experimented a bit with biotin at higher doses with supplementation. Didn't really notice any deleterious effects to me personally. But what the threshold is, don't really know. It's not clear even in the literature very well. And so and even here they say upper tolerance, maximum daily intake, unlikely to cause adverse health effects, because they don't even bloody know, So they know there's a problem in deficiency. You have too much, your hair, nails, and skin improves. But there's really nothing there in terms, even in the NIH sort of document, if you go there and actually look at it, there's not really anything that we really know. And that's the problem with a lot of these. Remember, these committees get around, they have a bit of a chat and then they decide on where they are. Veterinary science is actually more accurate because they have to test the animal, experiment on the animal, which is sort of doesn't pass ethical committees in the West in particular. And so they can experiment on the animal to see what is optimal. And you know what the veterinary science does? It provides the dose to an animal, and they do the optimal dose, not the lowest dose, but the optimal dose, because they want, the animal to grow healthier and bigger and stronger and whatever, and with more, volume, because there's money at the end of that after the slaughter, so to speak. So that's the reason the motivation is money, and you've got to get it accurate. You don't want to use too much material, because if you use too much material, then it's expensive urine. They don't want that. And they actually have determined that the amount required is based on the volume, the size of the animal, how heavy it is, how big it is, which makes logical sense. Somebody my size compared to somebody Sean Baker's size has completely different requirements. These RDIs are just ridiculous. So don't really follow them. I don't think people out there, hunters and gatherers, really, people that went out, hunted animals and stuff like that, really actually sat down to work out through chronometer or some other bloody thing how much. They just ate a species appropriate diet and didn't have any problems. Obviously, we live, as I said, in a non-naturalistic environment, and we are exposed to many other things, and we may have to supplement to get additional stuff. And there are certain stuff that work better than others. Some stuff that are cofactors, you're not going to get, you get diminishing returns beyond a certain threshold. So it depends what it is, what the molecule that you're putting in your body is. Anyway, is Bart on R&R? I do believe so. He hasn't been doing much at the moment. I know that, I think he's been dealing with a few things around the house at the moment. He's been working on and off on that shed of his that he's been building outside, and he's been doing some of that stuff. I have noticed he has been on a couple of other channels and done a few things here or there, but primarily on his channel he hasn't been doing a lot. Yeah. So he actually threw an old video not too long ago with Ted on it, and on my channel turns up an appearance. That's what he got. His channel was getting hammered by YouTube. Like mine is currently demonetized, being threatened. Oh well, I'm being a bit quieter currently to see whether by the end of September whether they'll leave me alone. I don't know yet. So they may go through with a fine-tooth comb with their new rules and give me additional strikes, and my channel may cease to exist. Who knows? I hope not. But it's worrying, let's put it that way. Anyway, how are you, Troy? You still in that dump? I hear your illustrious leader isn't going for presidency. What happened? Oh, that's right. He will allow the other retard that originated from Washington, the VP, to go for it. Is that it? From one that can't make sense of the world, to one that basically doesn't understand anything of the world. Fantastic. Great leadership over there. Victor Tours pushing taurine for longevity recently. Yeah, look, they are. Look, taurine does help with longevity in a number of different ways. It improves the regulation of the body. It improves muscle protein synthesis. It improves homeostasis of a lot of things. So it's doing it more in an indirect way. It's sort of regulating a whole lot of systems in the body to make them work better. You can actually use it as a bit of a biohack for apoptosis, for enhancing apoptotic pathways, enhancing autophagy pathways, enhancing protein synthesis pathways. You can actually use it for those purposes, as I've talked about in the past on many occasions. But at the end of the day, you can't take taurine and guzzle down seed oil and get longevity. It's not going to work. And unfortunately, a lot of these people are being sold this longevity miracle from reductionist research that is happening. And people think I can continue on my little merry-go-round of lifestyle of eating crap and take some taurine and I'm going to live longer. Not the case. Not at all. Now, you may actually reduce the glycating factors. You may improve the Krebs cycle and reduce lactate production. You may do a few things that are going to be beneficial to somebody on a crappy diet. And so you may add a couple of years to your, poor lifestyle than to some other person in that regard. But I wouldn't classify that as a longevity thing. Longevity is a myriad of things that come together. It's, a good lifestyle that actually incorporates a number of elements that will actually allow you to live a healthier lifespan. How long you live is dependent on a very lot of factors. And it's not only diet, it also is environmental exposures, a lot of things. Your genes, your exposure to deuterium levels. So how healthy are your mitochondria currently, or going forward. Taurine and melatonin do help in improving mitochondrial function. But at the same time, if you're assaulting those mitochondria with too much deuterium, you're not going to really get very far. So it's very reductionist sort of play. And it's not something that I do. I usually, when I'm looking at compounds, I say, this does this, it affects this pathway, it improves this. So this compound found in animal foods has these beneficial effects in, homeostasis of minerals, of this pathway, of upregulating this pathway, influencing that pathway, doing that, making sure this works better, reducing the glycation factors around the beta amyloid, and so it can actually fold properly and clear properly, stuff like that. It can actually make sure that protein structures, water is manipulated around them to fold properly. And so without enough taurine, you can't actually even get the sort of water structures, the proper water structures can be disturbed by other compounds that, people are talking about quantum biology and stuff like that. Well, taurine is actually, it can manipulate water in such a way to reduce the disorder of protein structures. So it actually has like an entropic effect, if we're talking about quantum biological or biophysics effects. But if you're assaulting yourself with deuterium and a whole lot of other things, forget it. Massive amounts of glycating factors. It's has to be taken within the holistic sort of lifestyle and dietary approaches that we do primarily that makes sense. Anyway, in regards to excess sulfur, I've tried molybdenum, 2 milligrams, and it helps more than choline. What do you think about that? Prolonged period of time. We don't have any research to show. I've actually done a molybdenum video way back. I don't know whether you've seen it. You should go and check it out. You can actually get it from the diet. So do check that out. Oh, here's Lukey. G'day, Lukey.
Hello, Harry. How are you doing? Hello, everyone.
Busy. Work doesn't seem nowadays to keeps me busy. A lot of things are keeping me busy externally to me. Which is annoying at one level. Sort of necessary, but still annoying at one level. It's just been a bit mentally frustrating, exhausting, things that are happening outside me. So partner's had issues as well. My father, work. It just seems like I'm stable and everything around me is just going to either shit or things are not actually working. So if I was on my own completely, I'd be in like blissful, yoga heaven or whatever you want to call it. But unfortunately, I'm tied to a whole lot of other people, and a lot of things are happening in their lives, which also tend to have an effect on my life in that regard. So I'm not bitching, just a tiny little bit. But it's anyway, it is what it is. Get over it. You're on a bridge, Harry. Stop frigging complaining, you old boy. So yeah, what about yourself, Lukey? How are things with yourself?
Oh, well, maybe less than ideal, a bit of personal drama happening, but otherwise everything's smooth, is quite fine. Work has been easy.
Yep.
So yeah, mostly personal stuff.
Yeah, well, we'll chat after. We'll chat at the end if you feel like it. What's been happening? But the key thing, since we've got you here, what's been happening on Discord? Anything.
Well, we've had a few
controversies and stuff like that. Give us the gossip.
A few rotards recently, as is the usual stuff. And I think people were talking. I think you answered someone's question already, by the way, because people are recently talking about like gut microbiota and how to replenish it. But yeah, that was basically the Lactobacillus reuteri point. But yeah, there has been quite a bit of talk about vitamin C again, believe it or not,
Oh,
because
really?
one
Still.
yeah one of our members, he was like, comes from a biohacker background, and he basically did the whole like high dose vitamin C for a long time, and even now that he's found out about carnivore, he does it, and he says that we carnivores are very dogmatic, and that we lessen the role of vitamin C just to make it seem that the carnivore diet doesn't have the issue of
Okay.
insufficient vitamin C. Yeah.
Well,
So
he probably hasn't looked at some of my material or some of Bart's material on these questions. So, but it doesn't sort of surprise me. There is still a lot of that misinformation out there. People are fearful, understandable, stuff like that. It's hard to sort of get people to think a bit differently, and also I think that there are these things go in cycles, because you're getting new people coming into the carnivore space,
yeah.
and it just seems like people are rehashing old stuff over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's probably a bit of that as well. It's not entirely sort of just that people have found new information or something. Oh, look, I found some new information, and playing Mick the silly vegan and just doing flag waving type exercises.
Yep.
So I think that it's just people that haven't really heard either me, Bart, or others explain that this is nonsense, or explain it. And you're probably getting things like, because I haven't been, I popped in a bit. I did spend a bit of time to sort of renew my account and keep my account alive, because I got a warning from from the actual website, and I left a few comments here or there, but and then did a vanishing again, as I do. But at the end of the day, some of these things do tend to just do the normal cycle, because people are coming in from a non-carnivore space, and they got similar questions. So you'll hear the same sort of things about retinol, the same things about vitamin D, the same things about vitamin E, the same things. It's just the same, because they haven't heard the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of them, their gateway drug,
Yep.
in a sense, to the carnivore diet usually is from these big influencers who are very, doing a lot of the food stuff and all that, but really don't have any deep knowledge in a lot of this sort of stuff, and so can't really answer these people, and so give them really mixed signals or poor answers. In that regard, they don't understand the receptor sites on the cell, how they work at a basal level, non-basal level, all these sort of things. They just don't get how the physiology works, how the recycling thing works in the system as well, vitamin C and vitamin E in particular. So you don't really need much. But if you derange that system with slightly higher insulin signaling, well, then on a constant base, that is, then you will impede the ability for the body to recycle vitamin C and recycle vitamin E, and then you will need more from the diet exogenously, because you've actually inhibited the ability for the body to do what it naturally does. But if people are not aware of that, because people view the world in a very reductionist, narrow way, it's sort of linear, this, that, and all that. They don't realize it's a complex interaction of a whole lot of systems, and depending on what the different hormones are doing, the different signaling that is actually happening in the body, that allows or disallows certain things to happen. So it's like, for instance, if you have slightly high insulin or sugar in the system, it's going to lock out hormone-sensitive lipase. You won't be able to access energy. So you're very insulin sensitive, and then you do a little cheat like little Hello Kitty and goes and has a sweet with Mr. Baby, just so she can actually, because she's never had a sweet for a very long time, and she's so insulin sensitive, 2 hours later, she's in hypoglycemic shock because she can't access her fat anymore. Fat's stored on her because it's been shut out. And so what does Uncle Harry that turns up recommends? Well, he recommends cream so she can get exogenous energy because she can't access her endogenous energy. And as her insulin drops and normalizes again, what happens? She can access her fat cells again because hormone-sensitive lipase goes up. Voila! Shock to the system. But if you don't understand this interplay, this having more holistic approach, you end up having this sort of very reductionist way, and you go, oh, that doesn't work. I must do this. I must have more carbs to resolve my hypoglycemia. No, you must have cream to get endogenous energy to bring down your insulin level so things can normalize again and you can be back on your species appropriate behavior and diet. So yeah, that's why it's very easy for people to because a lot of the stuff that's out there is in the sense of how can I say it? It's in the sense of our wanting for simple answers. If that sort of makes sense. A lot of people just want simple answers. I can completely sympathize why people want simple answers. Don't get me wrong. I mean, everywhere, everybody sort of wants that sort of stuff. They don't want to complicate their life. They want their, just give me the 5-minute thing, or give me the 2-minute thing, or 2-second thing, because otherwise it's just, too damn difficult for me to understand, or I don't want to spend too much time. But sometimes it's not a 2-minute or whatever question. I have to say to people, that, yeah, anyway. So what's your experience like, with, because you're dealing with a lot of these sort of polemics that are coming on Discord. So how are you and Necro Kitty dealing with all this sort of stuff?
I mean, some folks, like, they're knowledgeable, so I think they actually add to the discussion instead of simply like saying stuff. Oh, I think it was supposed to be like this, or isn't it dangerous because of something I heard this stupid guy say? So it's like this. Some people, they are annoying because they do an appeal to like consensus, or some like basically some very low grade intellectual source. So like that we just tend to say, like, look, if you're not going to say anything useful, especially if the person is being disrespectful, we just put them out. But but yeah, a few people, they bring valid points, I think, and especially because there's no way I can know all the biochemistry in the world. Sometimes we just need to engage. And I find it a bit weird that especially this guy I was talking about, he mentions that vitamin C is used for like a bunch of reactions, and it's not just absorbed through the GLUT4 receptor, because he was criticizing us by mentioning the idea that it leads to vitamin C sparing when you are low carb. But he said, but it's not just the GLUT4 receptor, and you can't replace vitamin C with other compounds, like you guys are saying, like uric acid and stuff, because there are specific reactions it needs. So like when we're having that type of chat, I think it's interesting, mostly because there's stuff I never heard before.
But also what they're actually forgetting is that we get hydroxyproline, hydroxylysine from the food, and we actually get these things. So our requirement for, because that's one of the key things, it's for these collagen sort of peptides, but we get them in the diet and we absorb them and use them. So we don't need to basically, our requirements to synthesize them goes down.
Mm-hmm.
And there are sort of secondary pathways that can also help with those sort of synthesis of those structures. So it's not as if it's vitamin C is probably more of a question amongst people who do not consume animal foods at all. Let's not forget that Napoleon's armies, and these are armies that are actually also still eating some carbohydrates. Napoleon's army cured scurvy because these people were only eating carbohydrates because they had run out of other, like dried meats and many other things. And all they were actually, and dried meats are also a bit of a problem, but they actually had eliminated all these sort of things, and they were down to, pretty much carbohydrates to survive. And so the only way he could cure the scurvy of the troops was to slaughter a whole lot of horses and feed the troops horse meat. So if there's not sufficient, vitamin C in horse meat or in any meat, well, how did he cure scurvy then? The officers never got scurvy and they used to consume meat. The sailors were the ones that were getting scurvy because they were poor and they couldn't afford meat, and they were fed these crackers and all sorts of other crap. So it just doesn't make sense whatsoever, even on an anecdotal or just looking at this. At the end of the day, most of people who end up with scurvy are people who are getting next to no vitamin C. Because the body also has the ability to recycle. Still, even low-grade autophagy still happens when you sleep and all that, can still recycle certain things, can recycle and actually take some of these collagen compounds, peptides, and recycle and reuse them. The body is not completely, it's designed to basically be very robust, because traditionally we were under a lot of stress sometimes in our environment. We're limited resources. And so the body has to have fallback options and all that. So, and we're talking about, if you've got scurvy because you start seeing, I've shown stuff in the past, the sort of the really damage in your face, you break out with all these little like pimples sort of things, really structures, your lips crack and really look bad. All the collagen structures are falling apart in your body. It's visible, if you've got scurvy. Early stage scurvy, really early stage scurvy is not visible. That's true. But if you're in that sort of state within about a couple of weeks, you will know that you've got scurvy, because it will be very debilitating and very obvious, even to people looking at you. You don't see it on modern day carnivores out there. Nobody sees scurvy on Sean Baker, me, you, or other people like that. So it's nonsense. What are we? Oops. I recall you mentioning the role of leucine in the clearance of debris or damage within cells. I haven't made that video yet. I haven't made that video yet whatsoever. Could this help with more stubborn forms of damage like lipofuscin? Yes. Taurine also helps with that. Taurine plays a big role because remember, lipofuscin is due to oxidative stress. Whether it's from the sun, on the skin that is, or whether it's from other sources, you can be to heavy metals and other things in the environment. You can be exposed, which can actually cause this problem as well. Some people are more susceptible due to genetics to some sort of pigmentation type effects as well. So there's all this. But carnivore diet tends to resolve it. Also, taurine tends to improve the situation. Sometimes if you've got accumulated damage for a very long period of time, many decades, because usually that is an accumulation, a build-up, it can take some time to clear up. But the video that I will be making on the fasting protocol will cover this in terms of how to play with leucine and another compound, and it's not taurine. Taurine's not a bad idea to throw in there as well because it enhances autophagy, but it's not taurine, and to get a better effect. So, and I'll be providing dosing and all that. So we'll cover that comprehensively in that. You're welcome. Darkfield Carnival, thanks, mate. Calcium alpha ketoglutarate produced naturally until age 40. Krebs cycle benefits, improves ends performance and avoids muscle fatigue. Supplements, yes, maybe, no. Not really. I don't see a Maasai actually supplementing. I don't see anyone out there supplementing in that regard. I think the body, Troy, is more than able to, if it's getting the nutrients it needs, animal foods, it's more than able to get a lot of these compounds and still actually, synthesis actually, like with everything, drops with age. That is a reality, But at the same time, if you're eating a species-appropriate diet, now, would I say that it's a bad thing to supplement in a small dosage now and then? Not really. I wouldn't actually say that at all. If you're getting a benefit from it when you're doing some sports and stuff like that, fine, Remember, when we haven't been ancestral from birth, none of us have. We've got plenty of damage and accumulated damage. I don't think anybody out there is like a Maasai sitting around supplementing taurine every day like I am. Okay, but I have a lot of mitochondrial damage. I've got a lot of senescent cells. I've got a lot of things that I did because I was guzzling down heaps and heaps and heaps of seed oils and damaging my mitochondria for the last multiple decades. One of my favorite foods was basically having fish fingers and potatoes fried in seed oil nearly every night or second night. Now, that's a lot of consumption. No wonder I got heart disease at the age of 44. And especially I started doing that when I started living alone, because then I wasn't eating with my parents anymore. I was eating alone, and, I was going to eat my favorite foods and drink heaps and heaps of alcohol and smoke and do all these sort of wonderful things that I did. And I paid for it. So, yeah, we're not like our ancestors. We're not healthy. We're not in that sort of state. We've done quite a lot of damage. Let's put it that way. So consider your, what was it? Go away. Consider yourself very, very lucky that you're probably not as damaged as people like me. So as I say to people, we're on a different journey, all of us, of healing at a different rate. Like myself, I'm still healing certain things, trying to get my energy levels up to a more youthful level. That's going to still take another decade for me, to slowly with the deuterium depletion, slowly with trying to dilute my fat cells with that I've got a lot of stored deuterium, all that, because I don't want another brain fog incident like I did last time when I dropped. It's very easy to drop weight. Let me put it that way. I could tomorrow rip myself really fast, but I'd end up like an attractive corpse, not something that I'm looking forward to. Remember that other lady who is that died recently in the low carb community? she consumed a lot of seed oils in the past as well. And she would have had a whole lot, and she actually lost rapid weight as well on a keto diet because she was doing a more vegetarian style. I forget her name now, and she actually died from cancer.
By the way, Harry, I don't know if you've seen this, but even Mike the Vegan did a video on this, but recently there was this carnivore lady that she posted that she had a stroke on carnivore. And obviously everyone's like,
Yep.
taking it, oh my God, the carnivore diet, stroke, it's going to kill you up.
Which is nonsense, not. She is not a person who's been on a carnivore diet. How long has she been? A couple of months, I think the lady was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It takes decades to accumulate damage. That is all from her previous diet, pretty much. That's all it is from a previous diet. And it also may be she's probably had rapid weight loss, released a whole lot of deuterium out of her fat cells. Guess where that went to? Into the peripheral tissue, her brain and elsewhere. Guess what damage it did? It did cellular damage and damage to the mitochondria in those things. When you do mitochondrial damage, what happens? You've got less mitochondrial capacity to fix things. Less energy, less ATP. So what do you think is going to happen? Your body's trying to keep you alive. So Richard says hole in the heart, etc., that contributed to the stroke. Okay, she had a hole in the heart. Okay, that can cause that problem. Okay. So that's good point. I wasn't aware of that. Yeah, if you've got a hole in the heart, a friend of mine had that. She had actually had to have surgery, and she's not on a carnivore diet. She's on a mixed diet, on a standard Greek sort of Mediterranean, carb-centric diet. And she continued with her low carb. Thanks, Richard. Appreciate it. Good to see you here. Yeah, look, that is well known. People that have holes in their hearts and stuff like that, they can actually have a slightly more predisposed to strokes. So, yeah, that's a medical condition, an underlying medical condition that she had. Yeah, appreciate it because I wasn't aware of her other condition. That's an important point that some people seem to forget. And it's the same thing with, people that have got pre-existing conditions. You got a lot of damage to your mitochondria. You're not going to be like some young kid that goes on a carnivore diet and actually gets ripped and looks fantastic. If you're a middle-aged person that's had a lot of health problems, you're going to basically be healing slowly and and if you're not careful about it, you could potentially cause yourself more problems from deuterium being released from your fat cells at very high rates, getting around and damaging your mitochondria and setting you back even further in your healing process. So that's why I did that video. It's a really important video that I did. Let me see if I can find it. I think that's why you guys come to me, because I talk about things that nobody else talks about, because they're completely oblivious or unaware of these issues. As I say to people, if you're a carnivore from birth, like the Maasai or the Inuit, throughout the whole of your life, there hasn't been one incident, not one. Actually, the biggest problem with the Inuit is that their blood's too thin, and in some cases, it takes longer for them to heal from the bleeding. But they do not have incidences until they actually get into the modern foods. That's when their health goes to shit. But up until then, in the old days, nothing was recorded, not even cancer lesions, nothing. Simply put, they were considered immune genetically at the time until they met the sad diet, and then that whole notion that Inuit are genetically able to consume a lot of animal foods without any deleterious effects, and then they incorporated plant foods, and then their health went to shit. And nobody talks about that anymore because they know it's nonsense. It's completely and utter nonsense. I'm not finding it. 500 videos, hard to find between 500 videos. I've got it on my playlist. It's in the cancer playlist, that video. And I cover that point because it's really bloody important. And people, this is why I say to people, if you've been exposed to higher levels of deuterium, be very bloody careful. If you're doing deuterium depleted water, if you're doing weight loss, and make sure it's 85 ppm, parts per million. Otherwise, do not do rapid weight loss or weight loss of any sort or whatever. And that's if you've been exposed to small amounts. If you've been exposed to large amounts, I would say you need to do about 7 years on things like liquid fats, like, cream. So eat more fat that you actually need to maintain weight stability, and turn over your fat cells to clear out the deuterium levels, and then experiment with short bouts of like 1 month weight loss, see how you go, then weight stable again, allow your body to heal. It's for the reason, unfortunately, all the damaging effects and all that. And I'm concerned about putting people at risk. It seems like everybody else just wants them to be ripped and look attractive. I'm more interested in basically making sure they survive and stay alive for a longer period of time on this planet. Here it is. Use deuterium from fat cells protecting cancer cells. I was actually on holidays at the time as well. There you go. So there's that video. And Tracy's here, and Mango, and J.W. White, or John White, I suspect. Necro Kitty's here as well. Louise De Cruz is here as well. Somebody, Lydia is here. Brooke Graves, and Jay the Flyboy, and Oggy, Brooke Graves, Laura A from Tennessee, greetings to you, and Scotty, and I think I've covered everyone. Mum, 61, diagnosed with osteoporosis last month. How to reverse osteoporosis naturally? Eat more meat. Eat calcium, because you also may have the same genes like me. Calcium must be consumed like dairy at night, because you absorb you absorb better calcium in the evening. Also, make sure that you are getting sufficient sunlight or vitamin D in the mid part of the day, around about 11ish. So if you're in daylight savings, do it 10, because it's really 10 o'clock. Do it at 12, because it's really 11 o'clock. Because you're at daylight savings, you're going an hour ahead, but really you want to be in normal time, which is 11 o'clock, around 11 o'clock, or 10:30 to 11, around that sort of is when the strongest intensity of UVB is. So I recommend that people around about 11ish take their vitamin D. Sort of it goes from, 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock. But there's a bit of a spike, especially if you're further away from the equator at around that time. I think it's the angle of the Earth. Can't remember now. It's a very long time, 9 years ago that I looked at it. Something to do with the angle of the Earth. And I suspect you're in North America, so you're not in the tropics. If you're in the tropics, it's a bit of a longer window, but also a shorter window. So it's sort of like from 9 on to about 4, 5 you can still get, because it's a more even, and then it sort of drops off because the evening comes very rapid as the Earth is circling on the equator. You're going to you'll lose light much faster. You're not on an angle, like the Earth, to be able to still get those rays that are coming in on an angle. It's slightly different. They're coming right from above, less on an angle. That's why you actually get it for a bit longer in the tropics. It's probably the reason why people's skin is much darker in the tropics, to protect them from excessive exposure to UVB. Anyway, so these are the little reasons why these things
You
exist.
are a globe Earth shield, Harry.
I am. How dare I? I'll upset the flat earthers. Yes, they can get a frisbee and hit themselves over the head, so I don't have to do it. Yes, I always say just stand outside and look at your shadow at different times of the day and measure that. And if you're not convinced it's round, well, then you've got a problem, a real big problem. Okay, let's move on. These experiments were done all the way back by some of my ancestors who did the experiments in different parts of the world. One actually in Alexandria, and actually took measurements at a different distance down in Sudan in order to see the different shadow, to be able to work out, and I forget his name, but he actually calculated it to very close to modern levels of calculation with their technological capacity at that time. So, no, I don't think he was involved in the conspiracy, because he's long dead since then. So, yes. Unfortunately, look, the elites like to muddy the waters. The whole thing about PSYOPs is that you throw some truths within a whole lot of lies, and you mix and stir. People that just jump on anything, are super sensitive to basically just jumping on there, oh, they're doing this, oh, they're doing that, they may not be. My sort of view is I don't know. And I don't put a lot of credence in that. I'm not going to jump through their hoops either. But stuff that I'm certain about, I'm going, yeah, I know that. I'm certain about this. I know that this is happening because I've got good intelligence. I know the hypocrisy, like we've got a few people who are in bed, investors, with certain people in other countries who are doing things we're supposed to be sanctioning. How come? So, and there's a trail. I mean, you can get on a yacht and go out to sea in part of the Ionian Sea and see certain ships that are basically transferring oil at night. You can see certain things happening in certain areas. People have done this and actually seen this sort of stuff, so they've recorded that they've actually detected these things happening. So it's not as if these things aren't happening. They are happening, But there's a lot of what happens is people will say that, and then they'll throw in a whole lot of other things which have nothing to do, no relevance. And what happens is it's the best way, the most effective way of these elite political financial classes to manipulate people, because they muddy the water. And so when you start spouting out all this sort of stuff, the average person will look at you and go, well, you lose credibility amongst the average person is what happens. And that's the whole purpose. They want you to lose credibility. And that is how they're able to manipulate the majority. See, I don't basically go and try to, tell people all these things. Oh, this is happening on this. No, don't do that. Doesn't work. So what you do is you point out certain contradictions. I'll give you an example. I had a video of John's that I put recently, the guy from Britain that does all the stuff about, who's a trained nurse and also an academic that teaches nursing at university level, who does a lot of videos on, regards to the, Jabba the Hutt and all this sort of stuff and his merry men. And he looks at excess deaths and stuff like that. And he shows actual statistics and gets people. And that's the sort of stuff I tell people. I go, in Australia, our levels we were the most prolific Jabba the Hutt supporters. And our levels of excess deaths are up to 80%. That's even that some of the other countries at about 6% or whatever is just excessive as well. But ours is like 3 times some of these other countries that consider that they have a problem. It's really bad in Australia, the excess deaths. And there's probably other contributing factors, lifestyle factors, that are basically amplifying these effects. Obviously, if people are more obese, more sick, have more issues, and then Jabba the Hutt friendly, well, obviously, they're going to exacerbate the situation and make things worse. So anyway, getting back to this mum, a 61-year-old mum. Look, meat, dairy may be your issue, and if you're going to have like yogurt at night, add some leucine and taurine and mix it in. So 6 grams of leucine, 6 grams of taurine, mix it into the yogurt. Have about 300 to 400, have a good size, about 300 grams, or so as a meal, as a light evening meal, no other food, just that. And make sure your vitamin D status is good, and this is what Dad does. So it's really, really easy. I just eat my yogurt all over the place, sort of things. I do have other, so I'll have probably less yogurt, and I'll have probably things like, that's if you can tolerate it as well. That's could be an issue as well. If you can't, just find some other source of being able to put it into your system as well. There are sardines and all sorts of things. Leucine is a powdery stuff, which is really hard. You've got to mix it into something. Trying to swallow it is really hard, I can tell you. You'll understand what I mean when I do that fasting video. You'll hate me for it. So it's not a pleasant way of actually consuming powders while you're fasting with water. It's but you do get some enhancements in cellular cleanup. But yeah, in that regard, I would have to say, how long does it take for taurine to clean out glycation out of the body? How long is a piece of string? How much damage do you have? How much, what additional assaults are you still doing currently? Are you still assaulting the body? Are you being exposed to things like mold and other things like that are basically causing, oxalate crystals inside and are depleting your taurine? So you can't actually work as, what's your home environment, your work environment? There's that opens up a can of worms in terms of questions, so it's not. I've had one person that was heavily exposed in a work environment to mold, like all the equipment underneath was all, it's an industrial site, very moldy and all that, very wet, very damp. And that person had excessive oxalate, especially on a carnivore diet, and was struggling. They had to literally get up to 20 grams just to be able to cope to go to work nearly, to deal with, because the other people are eating mixed diet, he was dumping. So it was just excessive. So it can be a problem. I don't know what your work environment is yet. Tracy, what happened to the curls? Harry, curls get the... I was trying to look a bit more respectable, Tracy. I haven't had a haircut. I'm going to have it next week. I was supposed to. I turned up on Friday. I look in at the end of work, and there was just a line of people there. And I go, oh, not waiting 2 hours here until I get a haircut. I kept on walking. So that's a problem with a lot of tradie. We've got a reverse pyramid now in terms of demographic in the West, and less young people and more older people and more people retiring. And the problem is, you can't automate certain tasks, and hairdressing and stuff like that is going to be, you're going to be paying through the nose to get a haircut in the future, the way it's going. And so they keep on increasing their prices, I've noticed, which is annoying. Troy goes, leucine tastes horrible when taking straight with nothing. Try that experiment. Yeah, laugh out loud. Yeah, I know. So did I. Painful, difficult. Even when you try to dilute it quite a bit to be able to swallow it fast, it's not fun. Let's put it that way. Anyway, I like to make life difficult for you. No, Troy, no gain, no pain, no gain. Anyway, yes, somebody has to teach some of these young kids how to cheat properly. Nathan. No drink. There's a wink from Scotty. Anyway, what are your thoughts on disposable soma theory of aging? I don't really buy into it. I think humans stay around a bit longer as grandparents, as wise people with knowledge to pass on to younger people, because we transfer knowledge through, we don't see, some animals instinctively will transfer knowledge through genetics far more. We don't. We probably, some information is transferred genetically from one soma to another soma. A soma is a Greek word for meaning the body. Okay, just so you know. So that's really what it is. And the disposable soma theory means that once you've actually reproduced, had a lot of fun with hanky-panky, that sort of stuff, then, nature goes, well, we'll snuff you out. We don't need you anymore. You can go. It's a ridiculous theory. Otherwise, we would not see longevity in populations that are eating a species-appropriate diet and not doing other inappropriate things. So if that held up, everybody would basically fall off the perch they would rapidly get into senescence and rapidly die off in their 50s, 60s or whatever when they cease to be reproductively successful. That doesn't happen. So I don't buy that theory. I think it's a load of bullshit, like a lot of theories out there. Yes, like the blood type theory, another piece of bullshit. There's plenty of them out there. Believe me, somebody actually asked me that recently question. I actually pointed out to him, do you realize the dominant blood type in this part of the world or that part of the world is this, this, and this? And they go, oh, no. So you have grain-eating populations and non-grain-eating populations with the same antigen, and others that are completely different, like O types that are either grain or non-grain, again. So one does not match the other. Guess what correlates? Disease. Pathogens. Say no more. Has nothing to do with anything else. little buggers called viruses and other things and pathogens that are basically changing that. Like malaria, you get sickle cell for the same reason, to protect against sickle cell type, from severe malaria, certain types of strains of malaria that can be very deadly. So you have in West Africa sickle cell type, and you have one in the Mediterranean as well, which provides certain level of protection for those populations from certain dangerous strains of malaria. Those who were able to adapt in that way survived. The rest, as the Romans say, put them to death. Yes. So, no, I don't buy that bullshit. Does anybody come on Discord and actually ask these sort of questions with you guys?
Some people do. Honestly, I need to do a better job. There's a lot going on and I haven't been keeping up. And I've noticed that there's like a large volume of bullshit and a large influx of newbies. So I was getting a bit overwhelmed. I'm like, oh God.
Yes, it's sort of, it has been escalating. I've noticed, I've come across some comments on my channel with new people that have come across and asking me questions, and I go, is this stuff still circulating around?
Yeah, like, yeah, but I've been getting a bit tired, and I have to confess that I haven't been looking at this server as much as I used to. But yeah, I keep seeing out that stuff. Maybe someone will rehash something about, oh, what is the best animal fat to use, or oh, why is olive oil a problem, or things of a certain like. There's a search function on Discord. It's like I don't mind explaining something again if it's worth it, but there are things that we have talked about like 1,000 times. So yeah, it gets a bit tedious sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of some of the points I've actually also covered on the the Harry Serpanos clips. If anybody's not subscribed there, they should go over and subscribe. And there's a lot of like little clips that that exist on that channel that cover a lot of these little points as well. They're actually plugged primarily out of the live streams. It was one way of capturing the live streams because I'm too lazy to index. so somebody else is clipping out these sort of pieces and producing these. That's the real reason.
Yeah, it's a good thing they exist though, because a lot of times we just reply with a video link.
That's exactly what Necrokitty just said. I told people to use the search feature just an hour ago.
See, I'm not making this up.
Go there. There's your answer. Yes. Is there any issue with consuming raw milk at the same time as meat? I don't really know of any real reason. I know that, look, I know the Maasai, and I know a lot of people traditionally would eat these things separately. And I tend to have my dairy separately, like I'll have my yogurt separately. I won't have it with meats. If I'm having a steak and all that, I'll have steak and eggs and that's it. I'm not going to have milk products. I'll have milk separate from my meal. I know there's this habit that people have from the old days of having cereal with toast and, orange juice. And that's a habit. It's not really what people do, Jordan. It's a habit that people have just brought over to the carnivore diet and actually will basically have a beverage. They just have to have a beverage with every bloody meal. It's just like, it's weird. But anyway, so I usually tend to, when I'm I don't have coffee with my food. It's, I'll have coffee, that's fine. And I'll have no food at the same time. Yogurt, will be separate. The only thing that I probably have with meat and all that, I may have a bit of cheese. That's about it. That's the only dairy food. I won't have any milk. I won't have any yogurt. I'll just have basically, well, in the old days, I used to have, if I use spices to sort of, you gotta, pepper spices and stuff like that. But that's an inappropriate thing. Nightshades, it's probably not a good thing to consume. But if somebody wants to spice up their life, my father still consumes nightshades. He grows the damn things. Big, these little red peppers and little green peppers. The red peppers are just, I don't know how he eats them raw. I just had a little tiny bit, and I was looking for let's say I had to guzzle. So, I had to use some of his yogurt because he's got no milk. And then I had to basically go home and guzzle some milk just to try and deal with the effects. So Dad doesn't seem to have any sense of senses at all on his tongue, maybe, because he can just munch away, like one of those red peppers. Just ridiculous. Anyway, my dad's weird. Don't say anything useful for the next few minutes. I've got to go make coffee. You can always put it back and then speed it up a bit and then get to the live again. I think that's our who does that? I know Necro sometimes speeds me up. There's oh, that's right. Yeah, Hello Kitty does as well. You like it fast, don't you, girls? Anyway, so yes, there's an option. Carl, sorry, I'm lowering my immune system, donating plasma. You mean you're giving blood? It's not very clear. You can't just give plasma. You give blood, and then they can actually, So
kind of a pun there. Oh, it's not very clear.
No, I'm confused. I mean, if you're actually the most effective way to turn over your immune system is to do a 3-day fast. That will really lower your immune system. If you do a 3-day fast and then rebuild it right after with food. So long-term fasting is the only effective way of actually lowering or turning over your immune system, in a sense. The only other thing that actually makes the immune system weaker over time is glycation or damage to its senescence. It's called immunosenescence. That means where your immune system has become damaged, old, the cells. And the most effective way in dealing with immunosenescence is our favorite compound, Lukey. What is our favorite compound?
Oh, taurine.
Exactly.
Yes. I was actually
going back. Go ahead.
For the plasma donation thing. Apparently, it's done with apheresis, and it's an apparatus that separates out the plasma.
Okay.
Like continuously. I had never heard of this. I didn't even think it was possible to do it continuously.
What, for an actual person?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to look into it.
Okay,
so this is actually a procedure,
mm-hmm.
Carl. Okay, I wasn't aware of it. I'll look into it. Next time I have a live stream, ask me again. I'll look into it and find out more about it. And can you tell me the reasons why you do it? Is there a reason that you have to reduce your amount? Is this a genetic disorder where you're actually producing too much plasma? Is there some sort of genetic disorder, outside the stuff that I'm aware of, the regular stuff? So now you've actually, I'm intrigued. Once I hear something that I haven't heard from before, I go away and have to find out everything about it.
I just did some like surface level search on it, but apparently it's a thing.
Okay. Look, there's a lot of procedures out there, medical procedures, that for many years I wasn't aware of. The majority of us aren't. And I've just over time, as people ask me about those medical procedures and things and mention certain genes, then I look into certain genes and I find out what are the susceptible populations and what are the compounds or the lifestyle factors that are basically driving those things. And then it usually is the normal culprits, poor diet, poor lifestyle, those sort of things that are usually driving most of these derangements. And those people that have got certain genes are just more susceptible, nothing else. It's not that the genes are driving the disease, it's just that they are more susceptible. It's a bit like the ApoE44. It's not the ApoE44 that causes a problem. It's the problem that because the ApoE44 provides more receptor sites for chylomicron remnants on the liver, surface of the liver, they take up the chylomicron remnants or fat from the diet faster. And if they're taking in fat and sugar at the same time, that's going to cause some level of inflammation in the liver. And that liver inflammation is going to be a problem chronically over time. And so these people with that have much higher Randall cycle activation in the liver than people without those genetics. So that, where others will get in the peripheral, the rest of the body, Randall cycle activation, because they've still got accumulating chylomicron circulating fat, trying to find a place to birth that can't, and you've got sugar in the bloodstream. You may not have as much LDL, but at the end of the day, you still got energy of two sorts that are circulating around trying to get. And this is where they go, chylomicron remnants, accumulation of high amounts of chylomicron remnants has been also associated with disease sort of stuff. Well, who are those people? Those people are people that have got the ApoE22. The other extreme, that means they don't take up the fat coming in from the diet as fast. And so chylomicrons circulate for longer. And so that's why they're now, people say, you've got to measure how many of your chylomicron remnants are in the system, because that is definitely causal as well, like LDLC. No, it's not. It's the Randall cycle still. It's just that basically you've got one truck. If you've got an ApoE44, that means the LDL truck, or you've got the chylomicron truck if you've got the ApoE22. That's all it is, because you're not taking it up in the liver to repackage it out as VLDL and ending up as more LDL. And that's because of, the way your liver operates in terms of processing sugar and fat. People which would have been the traditional ancestral ApoE44, they wouldn't have had a lot of sugar in their system ever, because there wasn't much around prior until domestication of plants. So pretty much up until that day, your pretty much majority of the energy coming in was in terms of chylomicrons, and so the uptake of that energy was rapid with the more receptor sites. And then we expose ourselves to plants and our bodies adjust to that exposure with reducing the chylomicron uptake. And we end up with less LDLC. But that doesn't make us healthier. We're still getting inflammation. We're still getting Randall cycle activation. It's just different trucks are actually in circulation with the sugar in the bloodstream. So yeah, fine. You're associating the other one, but they don't have a statin for that, so it's ignored. But when they do have a medication for that, it won't be ignored. You'll see they'll jump on that bandwagon and they'll say you're going to be taking a statin and a chylomicron, inhibitor. This world is crazy. as long as they can make money off it, they'll call it a disease, even though it's Yes. Going back, Lucine, what is the optimal amount to supplement then? It'll be in the video, even if one is eating animal-based. Oh, you're talking about, in general. Oh, you have a still big tub. Oh, look, I would basically take 6 grams, If you're having enough meat, you're going to be getting 4, 5, 6, 9, depending on how much you eat. I mean, probably somebody like Sean Baker may be even getting about 12 or 13 plus grams per meal, because that boy eats a lot, but he's big, So, I mean, just in, 100 grams of meat, you've got about 3.3, which is about, just slightly over 3 ounces. You've got something like 3.3 grams of leucine. And so, just take a wild guess. You're not going to be deficient in leucine if you're on a carnivore diet. You do not need to supplement it. Give it to your old man or to your mum, who probably doesn't eat enough meat and probably needs it more, because they'll get more benefit out of it. Encourage them to have a bit of yogurt at night with a bit of taurine, as long as they're not on blood pressure meds. Be very careful about that side of things. They could probably do about 2 grams without any problems, even if they're on blood pressure meds. Anything above that could be an issue. 2 grams, add 6 grams of leucine into your yogurt, mummy. Mix it up, have it. Your bones and your muscles will be a hell of a lot better in a decade's time. So you can repurpose it. You don't have to necessarily throw it out. Johnny, can the jab completely cure bifidobacteria strains or just lower them? From what we're seeing, it lowers both bifidobacteria and lactobacillus, but more bifidobacteria. But the level that it lowers it varies from person to person. So there's probably some genetic thing or some other factor that we don't know. It's still unclear. But we know it happens. But it doesn't happen to the same degree with everyone. Maybe they have a bit of protection with taurine protecting a bit, regulating some of the other animal foods that they're eating. They're getting some of the lactobacillus, they're getting some of the acid-loving bacteria, and they're sort of suppressing some of the pathogenics. And it probably is working a bit better in some people than others. Is it genetics? Is it lifestyle and diet, or a combination of both, or whatever? We don't really know, because we've got no research. All we know is that C19 and our dear friend Jabba the Hutt seem to basically be negatively affecting, or negatively, to be correlated with a reduction in bifidobacteria. So there is definitely an issue there in population-wide studies, and even in some little experimental studies as well. But unfortunately, you can't actually do a lot of them. There was a recent one that was actually done, and I was surprised it was actually done in Britain, where they actually deliberately infected people with C19 to see, about whether they were contagious or not, and whether they needed to mask wear. It was at Imperial College. And what did it show? Until you actually show symptoms, you're not contagious. So you don't need masking. And when you are, all you need to do is isolate yourself at home. Don't go to work. Call in, say, I've got symptoms. No different than, I've got symptoms of the flu, I'm not coming in. Stuff like that. I'm sick today. But yes, that was a recent thing. So that's actually an experiment. I'm just still waiting for somebody to do an experiment to see the bifidobacteria and other things like that. These are illegal in the US to do these studies. And in Britain, they're semi-illegal. So you have to ask and may be granted. So, and sometimes the minister can override the agency and granted anyway over the agency, has the right. There's the Westminster system. It's not the same legal. It's not like the American system where there's a separation of power within between the executive and the legislator, which is a Congress, and the review, which is a Senate. In the UK, it's basically you've got a separation between the Parliament, because the Parliament is supreme, Then you've also got pretty much the king in their system, but you can have a president. They are more there as a person who signs off on stuff or may reject stuff, because in the British system, if something doesn't comply with the traditions of the Westminster system, it sort of goes against there are certain rules that have been established over a long time. So it's not just constitutional, it can be these sort of long-standing rules, legalistic rules that may go against the spirit of those or whatever. Charles may not sign it, then it doesn't, in that regard. They usually do, it's just a rubber stamp of their government. It is his government, in a sense. But at the end of the day, whoever becomes government has the full authority of the Parliament. So the executive is basically a product of Parliament. That means the majority of the members of Parliament are the ones that elect the government. And so the government is given full authority to exercise these rights. So it depends. Klaus will make Charlie sign it. You conspiratorial nut. Probably will. But how dare you, Tracy? Yes, please. Did I offer something and did you say yes, please? That was the remark that I made. Is Libby, I didn't notice you. Hi, Harry, and fair dinkum benefits of infrared saunas. Yeah, well, there's a light therapy. The infrareds does help through cytochrome C, does help the mitochondria with healing and stuff like that. So it seems that it has a benefit to general cellular. So I'm trying to remember now. I think it's 630 to 650 nanometers is what helps the mitochondria, and about around 850 nanometers is what helps with the subcutaneous skin, or so in that sort of stuff for that purpose. So it does have some benefits. There is some research. So I've actually got one that actually covers both. I recently got it. Hello Kitty's had one for ages, and she said to me, "You just got one just now?" I said, "Yeah, I just got one just now, just recently." Because she asked me, because it arrived, and she's my next door neighbour. She knows everything I do. God, and which is annoying. And pretty much, I've just recently used it once, so I haven't used it. I pretty much. Some people use it on their face to make themselves look younger and all that. I don't bother about that. I just use it on my back. It's primarily I'm using it to try and actually for my healing my mitochondria. So I'm not that vain. I mean, I've got little dimples here, a little cut here from when I was young, when I fell on a tin can. So I'm not perfect, and I don't give a shit about that. But still, my skin's elastic, it's fairly young for being 57. It's probably the carnivore diet that's helped a lot in actually improving that anyway. But it's primarily for the mitochondria for me, personally. It's trying to accelerate the healing of my mitochondria. So I just lie on my tummy, and I've got it all, and it just got it over my back, and it just sort of do that for about half an hour, and then I get bored. I've got a low boredom threshold, so I can't do it. Some people can do it for multiple hours. I don't know how they do it. I'd feel like topping myself if I had to do something continuously for that. That's why when I go on holidays, I don't sit on the beach. I find that excessively boring. I'll jump on a scooter or on a motorbike, and I'll take off and go somewhere and enjoy myself, or even a push bike. I will not stay basically held in some single location for too long, because I'll freaking go bananas. Exactly. And that's contraindicated. Yes, greetings, Laura. Your thoughts on possible forever chemicals from cooking with air fryers? I'm really cagey about using, because of the xenoestrogens is what I'm concerned about with air fryers. Unless you can get an air fryer that's made of stainless steel, they do exist. They are a bit more expensive, and they're not exactly the way people like them, because they don't have the tray, the plastic tray. They don't have all these sort of things. They're sort of more like a little oven type thing with a tray inside it, and it just circulates hot air. So it's a different style, and people don't find that really appealing, because the tray is shorter. It's not, they can't put enough chips in it. That's really what it is. Things like that sort of nonsense. So they go for this sort of stuff. No, I would say. I actually also say to people, if you're going to buy it, make sure check to see the sealants around. All these sort of things, take a look at really careful, all the way it's been designed and all that. And if it's not designed in a way where it's pretty safe, so if the sealant's actually going like it's got the metals coming onto the sort of and it comes into the grooves, like the glass has got little grooves that just pops in, so it actually seals with the glass, and this sits on the outside, so you don't have the plastic on the inside where it's being heated, or the sealant on the inside. Yeah, I know. I'm very much a details person, but details are important, because that determines exposure, So yes, so you really have to be careful with air fryers in that regard. The sort of model, the cheaper, the worst. So I don't have one, basically. If you really want to know, I do not have an air fryer. I still use ovens, traditional. I'm very traditional. Things like that. So, yep. Yes, old man. I suspect you're still, Yes, I'm a Neanderthal. I confess, I'm a Neanderthal. With fasting, your father trying to, that is, yeah, exactly. What do you go? Fasting time length, I would prefer about 3 days. That's the difficulty. So yeah, that's the sort of stuff, and not regular, but periodically and all that sort of stuff, just to do the other protocol that I haven't done a video yet on, to sort of enhance cellular cleanup, and also with the because he did Jabba the Hutt nonsense as well, so he has things like that. I need to basically stop the body producing more of the stuff that shouldn't be in there, because apparently they put certain little proteins at the end of the little spiky thing to basically make it difficult to degrade and break down, so it can actually go in there and continually, in some people, reproduce and be retranscripted. So what does this sort of stuff do, this method, that I'll be explaining in the not too distant future, hopefully, shortly, in the next couple of weeks, I'll do the video. I may do it even earlier, we'll see. And no promises. And that will actually be an effective way of eliminating going in there, because these organelles inside the cell helping cleaning up that sort of stuff. Getting brain fog fasting for the upcoming fasting video. Enough already. Troy's getting frustrated. You'll have to wait, my dear friend. You will have to wait. Patience is a virtue. Nothing comes without no pain, no gain. You'll have to endure some more Harry pain before you get some Harry gain. It sounds weird. Anyway, I don't know why I said that. I only have broken capillaries on sun damaged sides. A lot of driving. Okay. Have you considered shielding? You can actually buy cheap shielding, like the plastic type you can put over your windows, your side windows. You can actually buy them. It's still see-through. You can buy them up from China. I think Alibaba has them, and even eBay, where you can actually just put this sort of coating, because you can go and get a professional coating done, which is expensive. This is a cheaper way of doing it. Save it for OnlyFans, Harry. Tracy. Oh, God. Oh, God. Into the gutter. It's not, just slightly touching the gutter. Deep diving in. Yes. So, oops, shit. Don't break the keyboard, Harry. Yes, so we cover that point. Just there, options. Usogene, we're referring for calcium intake. The gene sounds familiar. I can't remember off the top of my head at the moment. I'm brain fogged. I must have been dealing with too many vegans. Sorry. Just go and check the video, the one that actually talks about high blood sugar on a carnivore diet. That actually covers that exact gene. I just, off the top of my head, I can't remember now. Actually, I could find it by let's see. Probably haven't had enough coffee to wake myself up. If you find it before me, stick it in the thing, Lukey.
What's that, Harry?
I'm trying to remember that bloody gene. What causes high blood sugar? Anyway, I found it. Don't worry about it.
All right.
There's the video. That's the video. And what are the snips? And these are the SNPs. No, they're not those. These are the ones. That's one of them. And that's the second one. So they are the SNPs. Some of the SNPs that are related to calcium. Check the video. Check the video out. It actually covers a whole lot. You know, it's yeah. Though that it still, oops, jumped. Yeah, still seems familiar for something else, but I just can't remember what that is. It does have an effect, but I can't remember because I've been looking at some other calcium-related genes as well. Just, I thought it was brain fog in the drain pipe. A frog in the drain pipe. Yes, anyway, move on. Can't your man control you? They'll annoy you. Her husband's really funny. He's a nice fellow. Oh, thank God he's not. Thank God he's not what? Word salad. Oggy, how are you? That's okay. You mentioned it when you mentioned Taurine. Oh, yeah, okay. And you get a call out from Nathan. Very few discuss deuterium. You, Jack Cruz, and former UCLA professor. That means, yeah, Laszlo Boris, residing in Eastern Europe. Yeah, I think he's actually gone back. I think he's gone back to Hungary because he's an emeritus professor now of UCLA. He's retired. It's all goes back to research in the 1960s. It was, I think, the first publication was in '62 on deuterium. Had to do with some people in Siberia who they couldn't explain why they were living longer than some of their other relatives that lived in a different location, and then they found that it was actually the water source was low in ppm. I believe it was about 132 ppm, and that's sort of just started a whole intrigue about things. The problem is that it was still these people who were sort of ethnologist type characters. They weren't part of the mainstream establishment, so to speak. They wrote some research, pretty much forgotten for a very long time, and much later on it was sort of rediscovered to some extent. And then some, biophysicists and biochemists looked into it and all that and wrote up a whole lot of papers, did some little experiments. It was a quirky little thing on the mitochondria and stuff like that at the time. There was a lot of interest in, how energy is produced in the body, what impedes it, what affects it and all that. And it sort of didn't go any further after that. People didn't look into what foods may have different levels of and stuff like that and what, dietary effects were. They were just more looking at a very reductionist, very narrow perspective. It was a bit like the mathematics that this guy developed on stealth technology in Russia. They did a lot of basic research in Russia because at the time they had like half the scientists of the world. They did a lot of basic research. But the political elites that controlled the Soviet Union didn't necessarily approve of everything to go beyond the lab. So there was a lot of great inventions in the lab and knowledge that was developed or acquired, but never went any further because the elites were squandering a lot of wealth in mismanagement. And so there wasn't enough money for them to basically reinvest in actually creating tangible products, let alone they didn't have really a well-sophisticated, developed consumer society to be able to enable to use that. within the general economy. It was just sort of, fulfill quotas and you get a tick from the party official. And that's why there was a lot of basic science, but not enough stuff that actually became applied science. And that's where the Russian people sort of, you could say, developed some great science, but never fully exploited it. And other people outside the country ended up exploiting it. Even the book that on stealth technology got translated, the mathematics, and was handed over to Skunk Works, and they then applied it and was able to basically create the first stealth fighter, the F-117. So, yes, and then with better technologies in terms of computer power, they were able to create this sort of structures of aircraft that basically could be a bit more aerodynamic and still maintain a certain level of stealth, or the way they reflect back from their surfaces. If you put it on an angle, even without any stealth coating, the reflection away from the receiver will actually reduce quite a bit, just putting it on an angle. That's why stealth aircraft have their, sort of wings in a certain way, their tail in a certain way, two tails sort of, an angle and all that. Again, that's sort of for that, to reduce the amount of reflection back to a receiver. Yes. Anyway, but that's for another day. That's sort of my geopolitics and military sort of preoccupations that I've had from a young age. So I do know systems and weapon systems and how they work quite in detail. Yes. I even looked at some of the manuals of the CIA years ago when I was a youngster. Yes, very interesting stuff that those nefarious characters get up to. Got to know your opponent, my dears. Got to know your opponent, your adversaries. And the deep state has these lovely people that want to control the rest of us. Anyway, back to this. Yes, unfortunately, it's very few people are quantum. Sarah's also another person that has a bit of knowledge in this area as well. So she does a number of videos, quite good videos as well, covering these points. I've had a chat with Sheen, the Dr. Sheen guy that Bart had on, all that. I've had a chat with him. Hasn't been released yet, but it was a chat with him talking about deuterium and stuff like that, and discussing about some of his health issues and stuff like that, and how he ended up, I suspect, poisoning his mitochondria like I did. Again, same sort of thing, and because he felt losing weight gave him a lot of brain fog and caused more health issues, and that was from this deuterium damage that happened, and he was unaware of that. So it's look, the problem is quantum biology, quantum physics, and pretty much biophysics is an area that is difficult for a lot of people. I try to bring it and present it in a very simplified way. A lot of the stuff, some of the stuff that I do discuss are related to quantum physics in that regard, but I use plain English. I don't use the terminology, and that's deliberate because I don't want, one, to scare people away, and two, to completely and utterly confound and baffle people like Jack does. His sort of attitude is, I think it's a bit, you could say, elitist, that, if you don't understand it, well, bad luck to you. Well, not everybody has his IQ. And that's the truth. So I think it's a bit unfair to demand that somebody who's got below IQ or average IQ, which is, not going to have the ability to basically, or it could be the other thing is maybe he's uncertain about certain things and doesn't want to be challenged, as Bart thinks. Because if you can explain something very simplistic, you understand it. Otherwise, you can't explain it very simplistic. People that use the scientific terms is because they can't explain it simplistically. Because if you can explain it in a very simple, plain English, is you understand the mechanics of it, how it works, how certain pathways work, and how certain things interact. And so that doesn't mean Jack doesn't understand this. I think Jack just does it from a more elitist thing. I'm sitting here, I understand this, peasants, and and you can't challenge me, peasants. And I don't think that really helps our community or people out there. I think he needs to become a bit more humble, in my opinion. Maybe if he was a man of faith, he would be more humble than what he is. And also, he would be out there trying to help people. There is no value in holding on to the information and then belittling other people or saying, chastising other people. You're on the wrong path. Well, why don't you explain it to them, Jack, in plain English, so these people can get on the right path? I'm trying to help people understand how deuterium works, how all these things, but in plain English. I don't want to confuse the bugger out of them. I want people to basically enlighten themselves of what choices they need to make in life, how to basically heal themselves over time and have happy, healthier families and themselves as well. If I can bring a bit of health improvements and a bit of happiness to somebody, I've given meaning to my life. We're not just here to accumulate shit. If that's your purpose in life, God, it's a really boring life. That's the only purpose. How many hookers can you screw? How many drinks can you guzzle down or smoke or whatever? Really, is that all you want in life? The most valuable stuff for me is my friends, my family. That's the most valuable stuff. Not my money, not my job, none of that. The most valuable stuff is the people that are most dear to me. And that's why sometimes selfishly I do spend a bit of extra time with them, and sometimes I prioritize them over YouTube and many other things because they are so important to me. And I think that's important for people to realize. Anyway, let's move on. I've had my little rant. That's the Discord stuff. Yeah. Weird typing, yes. You should know, hello, I'm Necro Kitty. There is always, those special moments on the Harry Serpanos live stream show. Yes. And Lukey enjoys it. That's why he turns up. What's the craziest recent moment you've had, Lukey, on Discord? Tell me the most wackiest experience you've had.
I mean, the wackiest is kind of hard to choose, but recently I was debating it was some rotard, a Jonas follower type of guy that he was being unhinged about. He was saying that since the cooking creates some creatinine in meat, that means it's poisonous for the kidneys. Therefore, raw meat is superior because there are no waste products in it from cooking. And it was it was such reduction. And the guy would hold on to this like mad, by the way, because if you apply the consequences of his reasoning to other things, it just shows that it makes no sense. But,
it's again reductionist on one in order to push a narrative, but it makes no logical sense when you actually go take it to the nth degree. That's right. Yeah. Look, go ahead. Sorry.
It's so sad, really, because cooking degrades some protein, some amino acids, and may create some waste products, but the bulk of the waste products come from protein metabolism. It doesn't matter if it's cooked or raw.
Precisely. That's exactly it. I was just going to say that is exactly it. At the end of the day, the reason why do we masticate stuff or chew it in our mouths? It's to basically pre-digest it, break it down. When you cook something, it's actually easier to digest and you can actually consume more. So you get more protein, and more protein means you can actually get more for your body, for your organs, because they need protein to grow, for your musculoskeletal structure, for your enzymes production. And also some of these amino acids also play a role in terms of antioxidant pathways and detoxification pathways. So, we need protein for more than just muscles. This is the problem that people don't understand, that it furnishes far more things in the body than just material for muscles. Oh yeah, that's right, bones are made of chalk. Unless they're vegan bones.
Oh god. No, it's fantastic.
But pretty much, this is the nonsense that we constantly hear. All metabolism creates waste products. That is why we've got kidneys to filter stuff. That is why we've got livers to detoxify stuff. And that is why we've got intracellular antioxidant systems to clear up the oxidative stress. As long as it's in a very low level, because we're not highly glycating or not putting in seed oils, which are highly oxidized, a whole lot of our aldehydes are like excessive amounts beyond the physiological limits of our enzymatic systems, our detox systems to deal with, that's when we get into trouble. Otherwise we don't. The small amount that maybe, yes, you increase slightly, but the difference is you're also acquiring more nutrients compared to eating raw meat. That's the advantage.
Yep.
So, and the values in terms of some of the fat soluble vitamins is very little. Even B vitamins, you don't lose a lot. So you're eating more. So in some cases, you may even get more than what somebody on a raw diet would actually consume, because they can't consume enough. They get too much satiety.
Yep.
And also, and the reason why they get too much satiety is for one simple reason. When it's not cooked, it's harder to digest. It takes longer in the stomach to break down.
Yeah.
That means it remains in the stomach longer.
Yep.
That is why we need to basically cook most of our foods, for the simple reason of being able to consume more and digest quicker, so to be able to take in more, to furnish our bodies. That's the advantage. That is why our brains grew bigger, our bodies grew bigger out of that advantage. That is why, Homo erectus 1.5 million years ago was found, even though existed about all the way back to about well over 2 million years, at about 1.5 started using fire. Guess what happened after that? A few thousand years of doing that, we started seeing bigger brains emerge, bigger bodies emerge. So without actually cooking to get more of the animal foods, we probably wouldn't see those evolutionary changes take place. And then as we came in out of the glacial period into the interglacial period, over about 20, 30, it actually, anyway, there's a lot of arguments on how many years it took, but there is a decline between what we call early Homo sapiens, which are also called Cro-Magnon man, and Homo sapiens sapiens, which is modern man, part of the Homo sapien genus, group, family. So, we're all Homo sapiens, but early Homo sapiens had bigger brains, 10% bigger. They're called Cro-Magnon man. But as we actually moved into the interglacial period, the animals became thinner and also leaner generally. So there was less muscle, there was less fat on them. This is why eventually we succumbed to using plant foods to engage the Randle cycle to build up fat stores, because that's what fructose does. We know that. Give any animal fructose, what do? You produce liver fat. The experiments have been done in humans, in rats, in every animal you can conceive, even fish. There are fish in the Amazon that come up to eat fruit, deliberately to fatten up to become bigger. Okay? So it's well-established physiology and science. It's not some woo-woo stuff. So when you do that, and your protein and fat sources are actually, you've got this big, more people on the planet chasing less animals, what's going to happen? Something's going to give. What are the most expensive tissues in the body? The brain and the gut. They use most energy because most people are not bodybuilders. Even back then, they just walked around and occasionally sprinted a bit. They weren't bodybuilders like today's people. They use a lot of energy in the muscles, but that's because lifestyle factors. But tribal people, a normal human Homo sapien in a naturalistic environment, it's the gut when you're digesting and the brain when you're using it to do things is what is going to use a lot of energy. So, people are not like He-Mans. That's with anabolic steroids and with excessive amounts of specialized training and all that, which tribal people don't do. You don't see a tribal person built jacked like an SUV in comparison to a normal car. So we have to realize that difference. And so in that respect, something had to give, and that thing that gave was brain. So we went from Cro-Magnon man having 10% more brain to slowly in that, as we're moving into interglacial period, shrinking by 10%. So all the gains that we made from 1.5 million years of eating more because we could cook it and all that and digest more, because it's, cooking is like pre-digesting. As a consequence of that, we ended up with smaller brains because we just couldn't get enough. And there were too many humans going after too many mammoths. Get away from my bloody mammoth or I'll hit you with my stick. Exactly. Yes, the two of us are here. Your thoughts on using water distilled to remove fluoride and other chemicals, etc., from tap water? Good idea, but you lose a lot of minerals. Just keep that in mind. And I don't actually use, as I said, deuterium depleted water, and for my coffee as well. Get rid of that. Gone. I know. How disgusting. How can he do that on a live stream? Because that's me. And that's how I roll. And I don't really care. You're here for the information, not for my behaviors. And as I said, obviously there can be useful if you can limit that sort of stuff, those sort of halogens and other chemicals and crap that are in tap water. There's also apparently things like they've actually measured things like what is it called? The pill. So people are taking, women are using the pill and stuff like that. And that actually, when the water is cleaned of bacteria and stuff like that, they don't really get, they don't go through, like they're eliminating the bacteria and all that, but they're not with chemicals, but they're not basically eliminating a lot of these estrogens and xenoestrogens from, all these different sources. And a lot of that gets back in circulation into the water supply in some regards. So it can be a problem, and it varies from country to country how problematic it is. So that's another thing, and that can affect testosterone levels, people say, obviously. So that's another issue in itself. How much is hard to say. We don't really have any experimental evidence. We just have a lot of anecdotes at this stage.
Like it's weird. I believe there was a city in Canada at some point. They were getting like sweet water coming out of their tap water
Yep.
because of like you just some of this low calorie sweetener comes out in your urine and the water
Yeah.
treatment doesn't get rid of it.
No. Yeah, that's the problem with water treatment plants. That it's all because it's money. If it's too costly, then your rates go up, or depending on if it's a local government authority that's doing it, then the rates that are the people who have got property in the area that will go up in order to pay for the extra treatment and stuff like that. So there's all these sort of things. So in a sense, if you want to protect your family, it's probably a good idea to put such a filtration system in. Obviously, if you're in, and it's becoming more and more prevalent because of you'll own nothing and you have to be happy. Apparently, more and more, the society is becoming a rentier society. People are losing their properties and stuff like that. But if you've got your own place, good idea. If you don't, you can always get, like, if you're renting, those are like filters. You can actually get filters that you can actually put the water in and allow it to filter. The problem here, and you can also get filters for your shower heads. So that's another thing to use. Is dairy essential to reverse osmosis? There are two issues here. Why would somebody be doing on dairy reverse osmosis? I'm a bit confused about that.
Reversing osteoporosis.
Oh, God. Sorry. God, my brain is. It must be the previous. My mind's still on this one. Yeah, osteoporosis. Yeah, God. Protein and calcium if you've got genetics. See, if you've got the genetics, because remember, bones are mineralized collagen. That's all they are. So if you're able to absorb enough calcium from the diet, from the bones, and also that means, do I have a good vitamin D level? If you don't have good vitamin D levels, it doesn't matter whether you've got the genes or don't, the best genes or not, you won't absorb as well. You need vitamin D. The calcium receptors in the gut that take up are vitamin D dependent. So if you're vitamin D deficient, you're not going to absorb as well calcium. So you can actually consume all the calcium you want. It's not going to. The reason why calcium tablets don't work is, one, they're not absorbed very well, again for the same reason, and two, the tablets cause other issues and derangements in the body because they create excess calcium in the serum. That means in the bloodstream. It's not put away. So when you have dairy, you also get metoquinone 4 and a number of the other metoquinones. Those metoquinones then regulate together with taurine, because you get taurine as well, taurine, metoquinones, and all that. They all work synergistically to put the calcium in the right place in the bones, or ram it in soft tissue in specific areas to suppress viruses or things like that. But they don't accumulate it in soft tissue, which is what, when you've got derangements, does. So, and also if you don't have sufficient, like leucine, taurine, these things, enough protein to maintain the integrity, when you actually have turnover of bone, you can have more turnover, because you got a vitamin D issue, you're going to have parathyroid issues. That means you can have bone loss and mineral loss as well. So there's a lot of, it's not just one thing. I need dairy. What's your vitamin D status? What's your protein status? What's all these? Because all these things work synergistically together. They don't work in isolation. That's reductionist thinking, which we, on this channel and on Bart's channel, we spank people for in that regard. So, yeah. So basically, if you use, I would in the evening have a bit of yogurt, like my father, that's got very strong bones at 88 and a half, nearly 90. And remember, he was in an accident as well, got hit by a car while walking across the street. No broken in his bones, no fractured bones. So pretty much strong bones, which are robust, unlike the vagoons out there that have got little chalky little bones that snap by just getting out of the shower, apparently by that Garth Davis goatee go, the guy that loves goats. He's incredibly in love with goats, apparently, from what I hear. Sean Baker said something about it a while ago, so yes, that guy and a few of the other vagoons out there. So dairy in the right circumstances with the right vitamin D status and the right amount of protein in the diet works really well. So not a problem whatsoever, unless you've got an issue in terms of lactose intolerance, and then cheese is much easier to digest with people with lactose intolerance because most of the actual bacteria will digest a lot of the lactose, the milk sugars. That was a case of, somebody must have slipped me a vegetable in here and caused me brain fog. Yeah, sometimes your mind just we all suffer, getting sidetracked or focused on expecting certain things you don't see with your eyes, you see with your mind sometimes what you expect to see. Yes. Don't promise what you can't deliver. She's still ranting, Tracy. Isn't a hubby treating you well or doing you favours? Probably not spanking you enough. That's probably it. I know you like it. Anyway, are there any issues? We're talking about light spanking here, not any abuse. We're just being comical just for the people that get triggered out there, just to understand the differences. Yes, even my partner likes a bit of hanky-panky spanky. Anyway, are there any issues with smoking meat using liquid smoke? I wouldn't use it because a lot of them do have other chemicals in them and stuff like that. And so I do have concerns about some of the stuff there. Clearly not. Okay, I'm not gonna touch that because I know I'm gonna get into trouble if I say anything in that regard. It's like a double-edged sword. Okay, let's move on. So yeah, I would not personally myself. I wouldn't touch the stuff unless you're gonna. I know that some people do make their own. There are some people that actually provide information how to make your sort of liquid smoked sort of preparations. But I'm the commercial stuff out there is so many different varieties and things. I just don't know enough about all of them, but there are issues with a number of them. I would personally keep away from them because of the compounds. It could be an issue. Oh, yes. Yes, Necro Kitties re-education camp. Yes, comrade. Oops, shit. Nearly spilt the water from laughing too much. Nearly caused some problems. Yes. What can help with peripheral neuropathy? Carnivore diet will help with peripheral neuropathy. Look, resolving peripheral neuropathy can take some time. It can be related to B vitamins. It can be related to a lot of things. Even oxalates can actually increase, like oxalate dumping can actually increase a bit neuropathy issues. Glycation is definitely the biggest one is glycation, and that usually has to do with carbohydrates, fructose in particular. So those sort of issues. So if you steer away from that sort of stuff, over time you will heal. So that's the best thing you can actually do. It does. If you've had neuropathy for many years, don't expect it to magically go away in 1 or 2 months. It will take a bit of time, as long as you keep your diet clean and all that, and persist with good lifestyle. Eventually the body will heal itself and clean up. There's no sort of like a magic drug you can take to fix, provide the, myelination, remyelination of, taurine helps with remyelination, and so does having enough cholesterol. So if you're deficient in taurine because of, let's say, oxalate dumping, well, you're going to have problems with neuropathy because you're going to have problems with myelination, as an example. So if you're missing out on certain nutrients, the thing that will guarantee you get enough of the nutrients to make sure that your nerves are properly looked after, any tissue is properly looked after in the body, is as long as you're getting enough amino acids, fatty acids, cholesterol, and a number of other micronutrients that have a role in particular as cofactors of enzymatic processes. Generally speaking, your body will start healing and fixing itself. At what rate will vary. What's your mitochondrial health like? If you've done a lot of deuterium damage to your mitochondria, it may take you longer than somebody else. You're 61, as you mentioned earlier. Somebody that's younger is going to heal much faster because they've got higher mitochondrial density. Now, at night, taking melatonin and taurine can actually help increase the healing of the mitochondria. So people that have got mitochondrial damage, and also lowering your deuterium threshold with deuterium depleted water will also reduce the damaging stuff in your body. So, and deuterium, that everybody knows that they've got deuterium in old age. They look at these tribal people, and they're in old age, and they've got enormous amount of flexibility. They go, wow, how do they have that old flexibility? And we Westerners have a lot of stiffness and all that. Even I have some stiffness. I'm not like them. None of us are, unfortunately. Well, what stiffens collagen? Deuterium. So if you've got too much deuterium in your body, you're going to have stiff collagen. That's fine for birds. So if you go and look at a bird study on deuterium and birds, different birds and all that, some of the birds, there are diseases where they don't have enough deuterium in their wings to have strong enough, their wings are not strong enough. The collagen structures of their wings are not strong enough. There's no research in human physiology on collagen structures and deuterium, unfortunately. But it's all in like birds, because obviously birds have it's really important that they have enough, in those collagen structures in the wings to make them stiffer and stronger. Got it? So obviously the little birdies, that's where the research is, if you want to look at it in terms, but we get that stiffness from deuterium. So as I said, there's a lot of issues we have, and it will take some time to improve. Anyway, in New Zealand, there's a fish and chips culture here, all fried in seed oils. Yeah, unfortunately, same thing in Australia. Same thing in Australia, unfortunately. It's the reason why Australia has over 65, we have 2 in 5 people with cancer. 40% of the elderly have cancer. It's getting close to 50%. It's crazy. And it's pretty much because we have a fish and chips culture here with a lot of fish and chips with seed oil usage for frying. As I said, I did the same thing. I used it because, you think, oh, the Japanese live long, they fish. No, they're only been recently eating fish because after the Second World War, most of the other animals were wiped out. They got them onto fish because they built these big fleets. It was actually a policy of the Americans, to be more precise. At the time, MacArthur was the governor of Japan after the Second World War. General MacArthur, that is, the one that was in the Philippines, if you go back in history. Anyway, MacArthur basically sat down and had, with the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, which became later known, had a different name in those days earlier, and discussed with them and said, well, what are we going to do? Because he realized these were the most competent people in Japan to rebuild Japan. Brought some statisticians in from the US, sat them down with these people in the ministry and actually reorganized the Japanese economy. That's how Japan was rebuilt. The food supply, he realized that, was really poor because of the war. And he said, well, the quickest way to actually get the foods is get them onto fish. So went out there getting on. That was probably a good thing because what did they get? Fish is extremely high in taurine. Without knowing, he actually gave them a high taurine diet. And this is why the Japanese have, much lower cardiovascular disease, because, much lower of any of these oxidative stress diseases. Also, much, a lot of other things, less stiffness into old age, the old people. There's a lot of things there that are happening that are mitigating. It's probably getting worse now because of the issues with the seed oils that have come in the last 20 years. That's probably really damaged the health because any amount of, not all of the, most younger people that are consuming these seed oil stuff and all that are consuming less fish compared to the older people, unfortunately. So pretty much I was, like any person back in the 80s and 90s, you listen to this low-fat culture, you go, oh, fish is a good option. Carbs is a good option. I love potatoes, so combine the two, and that's what I'll have. And that's what I pretty much had most of the time, and just occasionally a few vegetables because I felt I had to have them to be healthy. This sort of nonsense. We all have done this sort of nonsense. I just did it on steroids with the seed oils and paid for it, in terms of mitochondrial health and cardiovascular health. Let that be a lesson to you little kiddies out there not to play with these sort of things. Yes, that was the comment about that other person who we were talking about recently, the stroke issue. Well, hopefully she gets better. If she stays on the diet and all that, she will get better over time. Mango, thanks for your advice with the Ruteri. I got some and ended up making yogurt with it. Good. I know that NecroKitty has made yogurt and kefir as well. And it's not enough in the preparation, only about a couple of million. We need in the billions amount to be able to try and repopulate and try and get the effective sort of dose. It's because the company wants you to buy more so they can make more money. And it is expensive product as well. Fish and potato pie was a favorite. There you go. Yeah, but, I'm talking about taking these things like fish fingers and chips and frying them all, and potato chips and frying them. Well, that's what I'm talking about on a very regular basis. Sometimes it could be every night. So, yes, very, very poor on my side. So I used to go through gallons and gallons or litres and litres in our of seed oils at home in my own home. So, I was swimming in the shit, I was buying so much I could have seed oil baths. That's how much, just ridiculous how much I consumed and how much I spent. That's why I ended up with cardiovascular disease at such a young age. So really a buggery. What's the situation like in pretty much Brazil nowadays? I mean, what sort of oils do the people, are they on the general shit oils as well?
Yeah, it's like if you wherever you go, it's gonna be either soy or corn oil most of the time in restaurants that they use that's the ones they use in the highest volume, I think.
Okay.
If you get lucky, you go somewhere like where they use like sheep olive oil or something like that. But the rule of thumb is either soy or corn oil most places.
Yep. Yeah, and as Necro Kitty points it quite clearly in something that I've been saying for a long time, everybody comes to the carnivore diet with different levels of derangement and health problems and damage. And some people, it can take a few years if you're very young and you've got very little damage. If you're middle-aged, it can probably take a decade or more. And if you're even older than that, potentially even longer, 15 to 20 years, depending on the level of accumulated damage, mitochondrial damage, and many other things. Sometimes some people can resolve faster due to genetics. Some people have much slower healing rates because of detox pathways and many other things. And those people will be the sort of the extreme end in terms of how well they recover. So there's a lot of factors in it. It's not, but generally speaking, if you get on a carnivore diet, as Necro Kitty says, you will reap the rewards in the long run. So it's just a matter of persisting on that. Yes, I'm glad she stayed on the course, and she will reap the benefits in the long run. I wish somebody would tell her to take taurine, because taurine actually reduces the damaging effects of strokes and also encourages the production of new brain cells. So it actually produces, it doesn't do it in the periphery. You need cerule for that, but in the brain, it pretty much works into producing new brain cells, and it's cheaper as an option compared to anything out there or medication or whatever else. That's how behind I am. That's when she appeared. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. I'll just move ahead because we are getting low on time. So, yes. Taurine. For my musical. Taurine. There you go. That's enough for a day. Question. Get to the questions, Harry. Get to the questions. Oh, God. Won't click. Anyway, I think you mentioned it before. Did you? Yeah, I did do 23andMe. Any other as of today? I haven't really researched any other companies out there. What would you recommend for ancestral? Actually, 23andMe is better than Ancestral Health or Ancestral, whatever it's called nowadays. The reason is because initially 23andMe weren't as good with their ancestral information. It was a bit piss poor. all they did was what they call is aggregated numbers. So let's say they had more people from a specific country, they just lumped you all with those people. If a lot of people had those genes, well, you're probably from that country. Well, that's ridiculous. You could be born in another country and live in that country, but it was based more on the residency of where people came from and all that. Then about in 2017, they decided to go back and actually do it based on haplogroups. So somebody decided to go through the data, the information, and work out a lot of the actual genetic haplogroup information that existed there, that was genetics, or as it's called, genetic archaeology, that sort of stuff, and pull all that data mine, the genomics data, in terms of certain alleles that are noticed, or certain SNPs that are noticed in certain populations, and from all that they were able to work out certain haplogroups that people were part of, and also from there to generate a haplogroup family from your distant ancestors in different parts of Africa all the way through the Middle East, or different parts into Europe or Eurasia or whatever else your family went to. And so they were able to pin down the exact haplogroup. One of the unique things, the Greeks have a unique haplogroup out of all the Europeans, which is much easier to work out. That's why mine, I was about 2/3 Greek prior to 2017, and a third of, I had a few others that they sort of maybe from these other groups, because they do exist in parts of Asia, but obviously there are some Westerners that have gone in there, had children. Those kids have probably gone back to North America, or and so obviously those traits were associated, but they weren't from those parts of Asia. And then when they did the proper haplogroup stuff, and I had about a third from Italy, southern Italy. Well, southern Italy was pretty much, even to this day, there's a lot of people that still speak Greek in southern Italy, and a lot of them that identify Napoleon. People in Napoli, for instance, consider when they go in a soccer match against any other Italian team, they say we just defeated the Italians. They don't say that we defeated that other team. They do consider themselves separate. The Greek government doesn't recognize them because geopolitical reasons. Okay? But the reality is the majority of the southern Italians, or what is called the two Sicilies, largely that population identifies as Greek. So anyway, so basically those are the Sicilians that went to America, and obviously those people putting down as my birthplace or my ancestors come from Sicily. So a third of my genes were identified as that. Now they are Doric genes, which also exist in southern Peloponnese, where my ancestry comes from. So obviously, because there were more Doric than Ionians that actually lived in Italy, obviously there would be more of those Doric genes there as well. And since there were less Greeks on 23andMe, these genes were considered to be Italian rather than Greek. But once they did the haplogroups, properly did them, and there's also 2017, they've refined that since then as well, because there was research done from Macedonia all the way down to Crete and across to Cyprus, and they actually did the proper genomics of the Greek people, and pretty much have identified that most Greeks now are 75+% or more have identical Mycenian genes. So even the Cretans have Mycenian genes, which means Minoans, which we thought were separate from the Greeks, are actually the same people, but an earlier time, an earlier civilization of Greeks. Then they became Mycenian Greeks and all that. There were two waves of people that came in. In the Neolithic period, there was a group that came in from Asia Minor, and brought agriculture, and that left a bit of in the actual population. And then there was the Indo-Europeans when they exploded through Eurasia, and a bit of that came through not the islands. You won't find it, and you won't find it in Crete, but you will find it in the mainland Greece, some of the markers of the Indo-Europeans. But generally speaking, there you could say from Paleolithic period all the way to modern period, Greeks are the same indigenous population, more or less, that have lived in that part of the world for a very long time. We are one of the oldest indigenous continuous living populations. That's what these genetics proved in that regard. And my levels, as I've shown you in the past, is 99.1%. So my Greek ancestry is pretty much just completely tied to the Greek world in that regard. And I have nothing else. The only 0.9 is from these agriculturalists who came in from Asia Minor, which is, they're probably related more to people like the Lydians, the Hittites, populations of that sort they're related to, which are the Asia Minor populations. But yeah, that's a side issue. So their ancestral information is much better than what it used to be. And so that's what I've noticed. But also their health information is much better than the other sites. So now you actually get a good ancestral profile, but also you get a very good health profile. And the health profile is the one that I initially went for that. I wasn't really interested. When I saw my parameters, I go, oh yeah, probably Italians, Greeks from southern Italy. So I ignored that. It wasn't important, that part. And when they're corrected for haplogroups, then so if you do go for another company, inquire and find out, do they do haplogroups? Do they actually base their ancestry, which racial group you come from? Do they base it on haplogroups? Now let's just clarify that, because I want something to clarify. We're all part of the human race. There are no separate races. That's nonsense. That was, old stuff from the 18th and 19th century. What we're talking here about is 99 point whatever percent of our genetics are identical. We're one of the most closest species, because at one point in Africa, we actually shrunk down to about 1,000 people nearly. We nearly got wiped out, which means that we're a very small group of people. So we are inbreds, the whole lot of us. The rest of it's skin and all that's just adaptations. So you're a bunch of effing inbreds. Just remember that, all of yous. And so we all come out of Africa. We're all part of the one human race in that regard. So what is a haplogroup? It's basically a population that lives in the same area and intermarries. It's like, who are you going to be closest related to? Well, your relatives, your cousins and all that. Why? Because you're the closest people that have been amongst each other for a very long time. If you're in a village, you're going to be most closely related to the people in that village, because who are you doing on a daily basis? Well, the people in that village, So the village is going to have even closer related haplogroup information compared to the nation or, a group. So what it means is people that are related, that have been, let's say, having hanky-panky with each other for a very long time, in the same area. That's what we're talking about. The majority of genetics, so that's just to differentiate. I'm related to a people here that we've got a common culture, common language and stuff like that. And we've been here for a very, very long time. But we're all part of the human race. We're just part of, I don't use the word like race in terms there's one human race, and then there are ethnicities. And those ethnicities, the ethnic people, ethnicities, and I use it in the Greek word, not the nation state modern word. That's nonsense. There's a state. That doesn't mean it's a nation state just because they call it that. That's just, the modern propaganda of, the sociologist or whatever else. Ethnos in Greek, in ancient Greek and all that, ethnos means a people that are part of the same linguistic, historical, religious, whatever, that have got a lot of common things, like a tribal Maasai. They are an ethnic group. That's what they are, you know. So, and there are ethnic groups that have got different tribal groups amongst them, like the Germanic tribes, they Saxons and all this, but they're all part of an ethnic group, Germanic, but they do have these different groupings as well within them. And some of those have, let's say, the ones that went to Brittany, sort of intermixed with some of the actual Celtic. So they have created a different sort of grouping, and it's a mixed grouping, you know. Anyway, we won't use the B word because we're all bees, bastards. Because we've all had been intermixing for a very long time. It's just some of us haven't done it for a long time. We did it in the distant past, but we're all, at some point, we're all bastards. Just remember that. Yes, John Campbell. Yes, that's the person that I was talking about.
Right. Harry, I don't know if you plan to wrap it up soon, but I need to get going. I'm barely up.
I am, because I did want to have a bit of a chat with you. So I'm going to pull the pin, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to say goodbye to all of you. I can't see any real big questions. I'm just floating right through. It's just everybody's making comments, and, you know, especially this woman. That was a spanking part. I remember that. Clearly not getting enough. So anyway, we do have the Eurasia live stream later on. So I could have a special guest that may turn up. I don't know whether he will yet, so I won't say anything, whether he will or not. And it's not Jonathan, it's someone else from the UK. I'll leave it at that. Yes, says the King of Tasmania. Yes, His Royal Highness. Yes. And my distant relative, Ted, King of the New Zealanders. Yes. We keep in close contact. We need to keep the ball man under control, you know. So occasionally he keeps him under control and lock and key, and, you know, with a muzzle. Doesn't always work, unfortunately. You know, he's still trying. He's not here. I can say anything. Anyway, so yes. Thanks, everyone. I do appreciate the fun and games, the frivolities. And yes, do please say thank you and goodbye to Lukey, because he's neglecting his sleep and he's here spending some time with us. Anyway, thanks, everyone.
Yep, thanks, everyone. And nice to be here. It's been a while, I guess.
And see some of you in about a bit over 4 hours from now. So take care and see yous.